Welcome to Cherry Blossom BL Story, where emotions bloom and stories unfold. Sit back, relax, and enjoy today's chapter. The kingdom was on the brink of ruin. When the ruthless King Kale's past sins came calling, there was only one way to pay the debt: the life of an innocent prince. Elian had always lived in the shadows of royal luxury, never imagining that his greatest test would come not from the throne he was destined to inherit, but from the cold, unforgiving hands of the man who sought vengeance for an old betrayal. Now, trapped in Kale's fortress, Elian must decide whether to fight for his freedom or fall into the dark allure of a king whose wrath may be as consuming as his touch. Chapter 1: The Betrayal of the Kingdom. The royal palace, an imposing structure of marble and gold, loomed over the city like a symbol of power and eternal rule. Within its vast opulent halls, the air was thick with the scent of incense and the murmurs of courtiers, each plotting their own ascent. The throne room, where King Alaric sat, was bathed in the flickering light of countless candles. His eyes, usually filled with the steely resolve of a ruler, now glimmered with something far more turbulent: desire. It was in this very room that Seraphina, a maid of uncommon beauty, first crossed his path. She had been but a whisper of elegance, a shadow in the grand halls. Her presence was fleeting at first, her duties taking her from one room to the next, but to Alaric, it felt as though the very air had shifted the moment she entered his sight. The king, though mighty and feared by all, was a man torn between his obligations and his heart. His marriage to Queen Isolde was one of politics, an alliance forged for the stability of the kingdom. But Seraphina was different. There was a softness in her eyes, a quiet strength in her step, and an allure that none could resist, least of all the king. Their meetings were stolen moments, brief and secretive. He would summon her to his private chambers under the guise of needing assistance, his hands brushing against hers as he handed her the royal scrolls, his breath catching in the stillness between them. The forbidden nature of their bond only made it more intoxicating. Despite the weight of their secret, their love grew. Seraphina became the king's confidante, his solace in the midst of political turmoil. She was his escape, the one woman who made him feel alive amidst the suffocating duties of a monarch. She too had fallen for him, though she knew the consequences. But love, as it often does, blinded them both to the danger that lay ahead. Betrayal, however, has a way of creeping in like a snake in the grass, waiting for the moment to strike. King Alaric's jealousy was a beast, one that festered in the dark corners of his mind. He couldn't bear the thought of Seraphina's affection being shared with another, even if it was not given freely. His growing paranoia became unbearable, and one night, in a fit of rage, he accused Seraphina and her husband, Kale's father, of treason. Seraphina's husband, a nobleman of high standing, had always been a shadow in the background of their affair. His loyalty to the king had been unwavering, yet even he could not escape the tangled web of lies. He had been a man of honor, but in the end it mattered little. Alaric's accusations were all that mattered now. The king ordered them exiled from the kingdom, banishing them to a life of suffering in the wilds beyond the palace's wall. Seraphina's husband, devastated by the betrayal, died shortly after their exile. Alone and pregnant with Kale, Seraphina was forced to fend for herself in a dilapidated shack on the edge of the kingdom. The days grew long and harsh, and her health began to fail her. The whispers of her suffering reached the palace, but none dared to intervene. The king's command had been absolute. His heart had been hardened by jealousy, and his pride could not allow him to show mercy. The woman he had once loved was left to die in the cold, with no one but the shadows to mourn her passing. Seraphina gave birth to Kale, in that forsaken place. The child, though small and frail, carried with him the legacy of two powerful bloodlines. The boy was a mirror of his father, a man who had been wronged, betrayed, and ultimately cast aside. And as Seraphina held him in her arms, she knew that he would grow up to seek revenge, just as she had. She could feel it in the very air around her. The promise of vengeance was in her son's blood, but Seraphina's strength had been drained by the harshness of her exile. Her body, weakened by the brutal journey and her failing health, could no longer hold on. With her final breath, she whispered a prayer for her son, a prayer that he would one day return to the kingdom to claim what was rightfully his. And with that, Seraphina died, her legacy sealed in the heart of her son. Years passed, and Cale grew, raised in the shadows of the world that had cast him aside. The teachings of his father, though absent in body, were ever present in Cale's mind. Lord Arlen, Cale's father, had instilled in him the values of strength, pride, and vengeance. These teachings shaped Cale into the man he was destined to become, a man with a deep, unrelenting thirst for retribution. Cale's youth had been filled with struggle, his every step driven by the desire to avenge the mother he had never known. Lord Arlen, a cold and calculating man, had never shown his son affection, but he had shaped him into a warrior, a tool for revenge. The bitter lessons of survival and hatred were all Cale had ever known. But Cale was more than just a weapon of vengeance. Beneath the layers of bitterness and rage, there lay a man who, despite everything, still yearned for something more, a purpose beyond destruction. As Cale looked out across the dark horizon one evening, the distant lights of the kingdom flickering like stars in the night, he felt the weight of his destiny settle upon him. He had been cast out, rejected, and forgotten, but soon he would return. The throne that had been stolen from his mother, the kingdom that had betrayed him, would soon be his. And the king who had caused it all, King Alaric, would pay the price for his sins. In the stillness of the night, Cale made a vow. He would not rest until the kingdom was in his hands, and his revenge was complete. The betrayal of his mother had set the course of his life, and now, as a man of power and purpose, Cale would see it through to the end. He would make them all pay. Chapter 2. The Birth of Elion. The royal palace buzzed with the sound of celebration. Music filled the air, echoing through the grand halls as courtiers and servants alike rejoiced. A new life had entered the world, the long-awaited heir to the throne. Prince Elion, the Omega son of King Alaric, was born on a cool spring night, and with his arrival, the kingdom exhaled a collective sigh of relief. Alaric, though, stood apart from the celebrations, his expression a mixture of disappointment and resignation. He had longed for an alpha son to carry on his bloodline, someone strong enough to rule with the same iron will that he had wielded for so many years. But instead he had been given Elion, a gentle Omega, delicate in both body and spirit. Though the kingdom had its prince, Alaris's vision of a successor had crumbled with his son's first breath. Despite his disappointment, Alaric knew his duty. His role as king was clear, and he could not let his personal desires overshadow the needs of the realm. The birth of Elion, while not what he had hoped for, was still a blessing. And so, Alaric cast aside his initial sorrow and focused on what remained, Elion's future. The boy would be raised with all the grace and dignity befitting a prince, and in time, he would be molded into the ruler the kingdom needed it, even if Alaris's heart struggled to accept the reality of his son's gentle nature. Queen Isolde, who had once dreamed of a powerful alpha son by her side, now devoted herself fully to Elion's care. Her heart, like her husband's, had been filled with mixed emotions. Yet, her love for her son was absolute. She doted on him with a tenderness that only a mother could know, filling his early years with affection and comfort. While Alaric could not bring himself to openly express love for Elion, Isolde's presence became a balm for the boy's soul, sheltering him from the weight of his father's unmet expectations. As Elion grew, so too did the pressure of his father's ambitions. Alaric's disappointment lingered in the air like a shadow, always present, always heavy. The king had long since accepted that Elion would never be the mighty alpha he had envisioned, but he was determined to shape him into something else. someone who could rule with grace, compassion, and wisdom. Alaris's eyes were always on the future, striving to craft a prince who would balance the gentleness of his omega nature with the strength required to govern. But the burden of his father's vision weighed heavily on Elian, even from a young age. His heart was soft, his spirit kind, but those qualities felt like a curse rather than a gift in the eyes of the court. The courtiers whispered behind his back, calling him weak, questioning his ability to one day lead the kingdom. Though he was beloved by the people for his gentle nature, his father's cold expectations loomed over him, shaping his every step. In the quiet moments of his youth, when the demands of the court were far away, Elian often found solace in the gardens of the palace, surrounded by the blooming flowers and the song of birds. It was in those quiet corners, away from the watchful eyes of the kingdom, that Elian could finally be himself, a boy with dreams and desires of his own. He longed for peace, for a life without the weight of his father's expectations, but he knew that such a life was impossible. He was the prince, the son of the mighty King Alaric, and he would one day have to take on the mantle of ruler, whether he was ready or not. His tutors, chosen by Alaric, sought to teach him all the skills necessary for rule, focusing on diplomacy, manners, and knowledge. But even in the midst of his lessons, Elian could not escape the presence of his father's disappointment. Every time he stumbled in his studies, every time his gentle nature came to the forefront, Alaris's eyes would narrow, and Elian would feel the weight of the king's judgment upon him. Despite his struggles, Elian found solace in the palace's more tranquil moments. He formed bonds with the servants, especially Mara, a servant girl who had always been kind to him. Mara became a confidante, someone he could turn to when the world became too overwhelming. She listened to his worries, offered gentle words of encouragement, and helped him find strength in his own heart, even when the weight of the crown seemed too much to bear. And so, Elian's early years passed in a swirl of duties, lessons, and expectations. The kingdom had its prince, and though the people adored him, the shadow of his father's disappointment loomed ever closer. Alaric may have accepted the boy's omega status, but he had never truly embraced the son he'd been given. For Elian, the road ahead was uncertain, the path of his future uncertain, weighed down by both his father's dreams and his own desire for peace. One day, as he walked alone through the gardens, Elian felt a sudden, inexplicable stirring in the air, a sense of foreboding, as if the very world around him was shifting. He could not place the feeling, but deep in his heart, he knew that something was coming. Something that would change the course of his life forever. Little did Elian know, a storm was brewing on the horizon. A force, long forgotten and driven by vengeance, was about to make its way toward the kingdom. A force that would challenge everything he had ever known, everything he had ever been taught. But for now, the palace continued to hum with life. And Elian, unaware of the future that awaited him, could only focus on the quiet moments he had left in the peaceful world he had always known. The birth of Elian had brought joy to the kingdom, but it had also set the stage for a conflict that none could yet foresee. Chapter 3: The Kingdom Without a King. The land beyond the borders of Kale's birth was harsh and unforgiving, a kingdom built on the backs of warriors and bloodshed. Known for its brutal battles and storied history of conquest, the kingdom was ruled not by a monarch, but by the strongest and most respected warrior. It was a land where power was earned through strength, and leadership was claimed through battle, not birthright. The people of this kingdom had long grown tired of their volatile leaders, none of whom could maintain control for long. As a result, the throne remained empty, vacant for decades. King Thalric, ever the master tactician, saw in his son the potential to seize this opportunity. The throne of the neighboring kingdom was ripe for the taking, a strategic prize that could solidify Kale's power and provide him with the army and influence he needed to carry out his revenge. Thalric had long been grooming Kale for this moment, pushing him to be a ruler, one who would not be swayed by the petty emotions of love or mercy. Kale's heart had been hardened over the years, and his thirst for vengeance had made him the perfect instrument of his father's ambitions. So it was that, at the age of 16, Kale was sent to the kingdom without a king, a land in turmoil, searching for a ruler strong enough to unite its people. He arrived like a storm on the horizon, his arrival marked by the pounding of hooves and the glint of steel in the sunlight. The kingdom's warriors watched from the ramparts as Kale and his small army marched into the heart of their lands. At first, the kingdom's people were suspicious. They had seen many kings come and go, warriors who promised glory but delivered only more bloodshed. They did not trust easily, and Kale, though powerful and imposing, was an outsider, a young man with no ties to their history or their bloodline. They doubted that he could unite them, doubted that he could wield the power required to lead a kingdom such as theirs. To them, Kale was another ambitious conqueror, another warlord seeking to carve his name into history. But Kale was not like the others. He knew that power could not be won with brute force alone. The kingdom's warriors may have been strong, but they were divided, each faction fighting for its own interests. Kale saw the fractures in their ranks, the distrust and rivalry that simmered beneath their outward strength. He realized that to rule, he would have to play their game, to manipulate them into seeing him not just as an outsider, but as one of their own. With cold precision, Kale moved through the kingdom, using his tactical mind to sow discord among the factions and then quietly picking them off, one by one. He crushed any resistance with swift brutality, offering no quarter. Yet, he did so with a strategist's eye, never allowing the kingdom to fall into complete chaos. Kale understood that his goal was not just to conquer. It was to reshape this kingdom into something that would serve his needs, something that would serve the wrath of his revenge. Word of Kale's victories spread like wildfire. The kingdom's warriors, once skeptical, began to rally behind him. They saw in Kale a leader who was as ruthless as they were, a warrior who understood the price of power. Under his rule, the kingdom flourished. The borders were secured, the treasury swelled, and the people found themselves united for the first time in generations. Kale's reign was swift and brutal, but it was also undeniably effective. He established order where there had been only chaos, forged alliances through fear and respect, and built a power base that was unshakable. His strategic mind and unyielding iron fist made him a king in his own right, one who ruled with both strength and calculated precision. His reputation grew, and with it, the fear that he instilled in his enemies. But as Kale solidified his control over the kingdom, he knew that it was only the beginning. His true goal had never been to rule this land for its own sake. No. The kingdom without a king had been but a stepping stone in his greater plan, a plan that would bring him closer to the one thing he desired most, revenge. King Thalric from afar watched his sons rise with pride. He knew that Kale was no longer a mere tool to be wielded. Kale was becoming a force of nature, one that could topple the very throne of the kingdom that had betrayed his mother, and exiled them both. Thalric's ambition had always been to see Kale rise to power, to build an empire, and now that vision was coming to fruition. His son was no longer just a weapon for vengeance. He was a king in his own right, and soon he would have the means to claim the kingdom that had wronged him. In Kale's mind, however, there was no distinction between his growing power and his thirst for vengeance. The two were one and the same. Every victory in the kingdom without a king, every piece of land he conquered, every soul he crushed beneath his boot was one step closer to the ultimate goal. King Alaric's kingdom, the land that had stolen his mother's life, would soon be his, and Kale would make them all pay. As Kale sat upon his new throne, his eyes gazed out over the kingdom he had conquered. The land was his now, its people were his now, and soon, the time would come for him to take the next step in his plan. The world would know his name, and they would know what it cost to betray him. The revenge that had fueled his every thought, his every action, was no longer a distant dream. It was becoming a reality, and soon, it would be time for him to return to the kingdom that had cast him aside. to make Alaric and his kingdom tremble. For Chaol, there would be no mercy. Chapter 4. The Growing Divide. As the years passed, the kingdom's future seemed to be unfolding before the eyes of its people, though none could have predicted the course their fates would take. On one side there was Prince Elian, the Omega son of King Alaric, raised in the comfort of the royal palace, his life shaped by grace, diplomacy, and the expectations of a ruler who had never fully embraced him. On the other side stood Chaol, a boy born of betrayal and hardship, raised far from the luxuries of the palace, where survival was the only lesson that mattered. Elian's early years were spent under the watchful eyes of tutors, his every action measured, his future already set in the royal court. His world was one of quiet luxury, his life filled with the soft music of courtiers and the gentle whisper of servants, all of them bowing to his station. Though King Alaric had long ago accepted his Omega son, his affection was cold, distant, and often masked by expectations that Elian could never fully meet. Alaric's disappointment hovered over Elian like a cloud, and despite his best efforts to prove his worth, Elian could not escape the sense that he was always falling short in his father's eyes. Despite the oppressive weight of his father's judgment, Elian found solace in the simplicity of his surroundings. The palace gardens, with their fountains and vibrant flowers, were his refuge. The gentle touch of the breeze, the song of birds in the trees, and the laughter of children at play, all served to remind him that, despite the heavy mantle of royalty, he was still a boy who longed for peace, for gentleness, for a future that did not come at the cost of his soul. His days were filled with lessons in courtly manners, politics, and history. He was taught to speak with grace, to lead with kindness, and to understand the delicate balance of power. His tutors spoke of diplomacy, of winning hearts and minds, and Elian tried, with all his might, to live up to their teachings. But there was always a part of him that felt alienated from the world of power and control, a part that longed for a simpler existence, one where he did not have to prove his worth every day. In contrast, Chaol's life could not have been more different. Chaol was raised in the harshest of circumstances, far from the palace's grandeur. His childhood had been shaped by loss and hardship. He had never known the comforts of the royal court or the nurturing care of a mother's embrace. Instead, he had been raised by Lord Arlen, a man who believed only in strength and vengeance. Lord Arlen's teachings were simple: trust no one, show no weakness, and always seek revenge for the wrongs done to you. It was a life forged in fire, where survival came first and everything else was secondary. From a young age, Chaol had been trained in combat, his hands made strong by the sword, and his heart hardened by the cruelty of those around him. His days were filled with lessons in strategy, survival, and warfare, as Lord Arlen pushed him to become a man of power, a man capable of carrying out his mission of vengeance against the kingdom that had betrayed his mother. The lessons were brutal, and Chaol's emotions were often buried beneath a wall of cold indifference. He had learned early on that to feel, to care, was to be weak. Lord Arlen's hatred of King Alaric was absolute, and he saw in Chaol the perfect instrument for revenge. Everything Chaol had been taught, the training, the bitterness, the longing for retribution, was driven by a singular purpose: to return to the kingdom that had cast them aside, to claim what was rightfully his, and to make those who had wronged him suffer. Though Chaol had no memory of his mother, her death had shaped his every thought. The pain of her loss burned deep within him, and it was that fire that fueled his every step. He had been taught to hate, to destroy, to take back what had been stolen from him. And so, Chaol grew into a young man of ruthless ambition, a man who saw the world only through the lens of power and vengeance. The contrast between the two princes was stark. Elian, soft-hearted and gentle, was the embodiment of the kingdom's hope for a ruler who would guide the people with wisdom and compassion. Chaol, cold and calculating, had no such hope for peace. His heart was filled with only one desire: vengeance against the kingdom that had cast his family aside. While Elian learned the art of diplomacy, Kale honed his skills in the art of war. Despite the vast differences in their lives, fate would soon bring these two men together in a way neither could have anticipated. The kingdom that had given birth to both their futures would soon find itself at the crossroads of destruction and rebirth. The forces that had shaped Kale's life were gathering, and with them the storm of vengeance would soon be unleashed. Elian, oblivious to the growing danger, continued to live his life in the delicate world of the palace. His father's disappointment weighed on him, but he clung to his hope that one day he would prove his worth, not through strength or power, but through kindness and understanding. He believed that he could be the ruler the kingdom needed, if only his father could see him for who he truly was. Kale, on the other hand, had no such illusions. He had long since given up any hope of love or acceptance. His path was set, and there was only one thing he cared about now: taking back what had been stolen from him. As the years passed and the divide between their worlds grew wider, neither prince could know how soon their paths would cross, how the storms of their pasts would collide to change the course of their future. The growing divide between Elian and Kale was not merely one of upbringing or destiny. It was a chasm of heart, shaped by the sins of their fathers and the unspoken promises of revenge. Chapter 5. Elian's place in the court. The royal palace, once a beacon of glory and strength, had become a hollow shell of its former self. The weight of King Alaric's health had taken its toll not only on the monarch's body but on the very spirit of the court. His once strong frame had withered, his sharp eyes now clouded with the effects of age and illness. The king, once a mighty ruler whose mere presence could command armies, now struggled with each breath, the throne growing colder beneath him. As the king's strength waned, the kingdom's future became more uncertain. And in the midst of this uncertainty stood Prince Elian, the Omega son, ever the quiet figure in the background. His place in the court had always been precarious, overshadowed by the grandeur of his father and the absence of any real power to wield. Elian, gentle and reserved, lacked the fierce ambition of a warrior, and it was this very softness that both endeared him to the people and made him a target for those who sought to control the future of the kingdom. Prince Leander, Elian's older brother, was a stark contrast. Lazy, cowardly, and uninterested in the responsibilities of ruling, Leander spent his days indulging in luxury and excess. He preferred the comforts of the palace, fine wines, sumptuous feasts, and idle pleasures, rather than the burdens of leadership. The people whispered that Leander was nothing more than a puppet prince, content to sit in his gilded cage while the kingdom around him teetered on the brink of change. His lack of ambition and responsibility were clear for all to see, and it became more apparent as King Alaric's health deteriorated. As the days passed and rumors of the king's impending death began to spread, the nobles in the court began to murmur about the kingdom's future. Whispers of succession filled the halls, and many wondered what would become of Elian, the fragile Omega Prince. Despite the fact that he was next in line, no one truly believed that a prince of such delicate nature could lead a kingdom, especially one as powerful and contentious as Alaric's. The nobles, ever opportunistic, sought to secure their own futures, and in the absence of King Alaric's commanding presence, they turned their eyes to Elian, seeing in him a way to further their own ambitions. They knew that, despite his gentle nature, Elian had the blood of a king flowing through his veins, and it was that blood, though soft and unassuming, that made him an ideal figurehead. He could be shaped, molded, and married into the right alliances to bring the kingdom the power and influence it needed. And so, the whispers began. Alliances were proposed, courtiers pushed for matches with powerful kingdoms, and the pressure on Elian grew heavier with each passing day. Marriage, they told him, was his path to securing the kingdom's future, but it was not a union of love or desire. No, the nobles sought wealth, political leverage, and military power. They saw Elian as a pawn to be moved on the board of courtly politics, and the Omega Prince was powerless to stop it. Elian, ever the gentle soul, felt the weight of these expectations pressing down upon him. The thought of marrying a stranger, someone chosen for their power rather than their heart, filled him with dread. He had always been a dreamer, longing for a life of peace, away from the scheming and manipulation of the court. But that life was not for him. The kingdom needed him to be more than he had ever hoped to be, to play the game of politics with a skill he had never possessed. His father's illness had pushed him into the center of a battle he had never chosen. He sought solace in the quiet moments when he could escape the palace's endless demands. The gardens, his constant retreat, provided a momentary reprieve. There, surrounded by flowers and the soft hum of nature, Elian could breathe freely, even if only for a short time. It was in the gardens that he found clarity, where he could quiet the noise of the court and think about what he truly wanted, though the answer was never clear. Mara, the servant who had been his confidante since his childhood, was always by his side. She had watched Elian grow from a sheltered, pampered prince to a young man burdened by expectations. She understood the weight of his heart, the conflict between duty and desire, and she often whispered words of comfort to him in his moments of doubt. "Elian," she would say softly, her voice like a balm to his restless soul, "our heart is your own. No matter what the court demands of you, never forget who you are." But Elian's heart, for all its kindness, could not escape the reality of the kingdom's needs. As the nobles pushed for alliances, Elian found himself torn between his own desires and the kingdom's demands. The thought of marriage to someone he did not love gnawed at him, yet he understood the necessity of a union. His father's illness had left a void in the kingdom, and Elian was the only one who could fill it. But at what cost? Prince Leander, ever the indifferent heir, cared little for the kingdom's future. As King Alaric's health worsened, the court's whispers grew louder, but Leander remained blissfully unaware, or perhaps deliberately uninterested, in the kingdom's fate. His days continued to pass in a haze of indulgence, and Elian found himself standing in the shadow of his brother's apathy. The pressure on Elian only intensified as the months passed. The nobles, eager to secure their place in the kingdom, began to draw closer to him, offering alliances and promises of power. Each suitor, each proposal, felt like another chain being wrapped around Elian's heart. He could not escape the truth. His place in the court was not his own. It was a place dictated by the needs of the kingdom, by the power struggles of those around him. And as the court clamored for alliances and power, Elian could not help but wonder if he would ever have a choice in the matter. His future had been decided for him, shaped by the weight of duty and the pressures of a kingdom on the brink of change. Elian's place in the court was clear. He was the key to the kingdom's survival. But at what cost to his own soul? Chapter 6. The Royal Fair. The grand courtyard of the palace had been transformed into a vibrant festival ground, its stone paths covered in brilliant carpets of red and gold. The air was thick with the scent of fresh bread, roasted meats, and exotic spices brought in from distant lands. Flags from neighboring kingdoms fluttered in the breeze, and the sounds of musicians and acrobats filled the air. King Alaric, in a desperate attempt to secure his son's future, had orchestrated a grand fair unlike any the kingdom had seen before. It was not merely a celebration of wealth and power, but a spectacle meant to highlight the very future of the kingdom itself. Elian, though uncomfortable with the lavish display, was the star of the event. The Omega Prince, gentle and reserved, stood at the center of it all, surrounded by nobles, suitors, and dignitaries from across the land. The fair was not just a festivity, but a crucial moment in the court's political game, an opportunity for powerful families and kingdoms to offer their alliances in the form of potential marriages for Elian. King Alaric's health had deteriorated significantly, and his mind had grown sharp with the urgency of securing his son's place. If Elian were to marry into the right family, his future as ruler would be assured, and with it, the kingdom's stability. The court had clamored for an alliance with one of the most influential kingdoms of the neighboring lands, and the royal fair was the venue for these crucial negotiations. Elian had little interest in the event, his mind more occupied with the strange weight of the responsibilities he was being forced to bear. The dazzling lights, the fluttering banners, the laughter of the courtiers, it all seemed so alien to him. His heart longed for peace, for simplicity. But the demands of God and the nobles were clear. He was to marry, and his choice would not be his own. The suitors presented to him were a parade of power and politics. The kingdom's most influential families, from distant empires, all came to present their sons, each one eager to win favor with the prince. They were dressed in fine silks and adorned with jewels, their eyes gleaming with the promise of a future union. Elian, ever the reluctant prince, could hardly mask his discomfort as he met each of them. Some were charming, others cold and calculating, but none of them stirred anything in his heart. He knew, deep down, that his future was being written by others, and no matter what the fair promised, it would never be the future he had imagined. Among the dignitaries attending the fair was Kale, though none knew his true identity. The son of Lord Arlen, now a king in his own right, had arrived under the guise of a noble visitor. He was well aware of the political significance of the event, an opportunity to keep his eye on the kingdom that had exiled him and his family, to assess the political landscape, and perhaps make an ally of the right suitor. But for Kale, the royal fair was more than just a gathering of power. It was an event that brought him closer to his vengeance. Though he had no interest in the festivities, Kale couldn't help but feel a bitter sense of disdain as he walked through the courtyard. The laughter and the music, the extravagant displays of wealth, it was all a farce, a distraction from the true cost of power. He had seen too much bloodshed to be impressed by the shallow spectacle. His mind was focused on the one thing that had driven him for years: revenge. As Kale wandered through the fair, a wave of frustration and unease washed over him. He excused himself from the crowd, retreating toward the edges of the palace grounds, where the forest began to encroach upon the manicured gardens. The sounds of the fair faded into the distance, replaced by the gentle rustling of the trees and the soft, cool breeze that whispered through the leaves. The forest was his refuge. Here, in the quiet shadows of nature, Kale could think clearly. He closed his eyes, inhaling deeply as he tried to steady the chaos swirling within him. The image of the kingdom, bright and prosperous on the outside, but hollow within, gnawed at him. The people celebrated as if nothing had ever happened, as if the sins of the past were easily forgotten. But Kale had not forgotten. He would never forget. His mind raced with thoughts of his father's betrayal, the years of hardship and survival. He had clawed his way to power, conquered a kingdom, and now, standing at the gates of this one, he could feel the weight of his destiny bearing down on him. Everything had led to this moment. The royal fair, with its ostentatious displays and political games, had brought him closer to the kingdom that had once cast him aside. It would not be long before he could make his move. Kale's thoughts shifted to Elian. The Omega Prince, so soft and gentle, seemed to exist in a world far removed from Kale's own. A world of peace and luxury, a world where the harsh realities of survival did not exist. Elian was a pawn, a prize to be claimed by the most powerful suitor. Kale knew that much, and yet, as his thoughts lingered on Elian's quiet presence, he couldn't help but wonder. What was the prince truly like behind the layers of expectation and courtly games? Was he truly as fragile as he appeared? The questions haunted Kale as he stood alone in the forest, his gaze focused on the distant flicker of lights that marked the palace. He had no illusions about why he was here. He was no guest. He was a man on a mission, one who had long since abandoned any notion of peace or reconciliation. The kingdom had wronged him, and now it was time to set the stage for his return. The fair was merely another step in the plan. As Kale turned to leave the forest and return to the chaos of the palace, he caught sight of a figure near the edge of the garden, a glimpse of delicate features beneath the shadows of a large oak tree. It was Elian. For a brief moment their gazes met, and Kale felt a strange stirring in his chest. Elian's soft, vulnerable eyes met his with a mixture of curiosity and something else, something he could not place. It was an encounter that lasted only a fraction of a second, but for Kale, it felt as though the entire world had paused. He quickly turned away, his mind once again focused on the task at hand. But something within him shifted, though he couldn't yet understand what it was. The events of the fair, the suitors, the kingdom, it was all part of the same plan. But now, in this fleeting moment of connection, Kale knew that he would have to confront something far more complicated than he had ever expected. The fair had brought him closer to his enemies, but it had also brought him closer to a future he had not fully prepared for. Chapter 7. The Encounter in the Forest. The air in the forest was cool and crisp, the scent of pine and earth thick in the silence. Kale's boots crunched against the fallen leaves as he ventured deeper into the woods, the chaotic sounds of the royal fair growing fainter with each step he took. It was a strange thing to seek refuge in nature when the entire kingdom seemed to be celebrating at his expense, but the fair had overwhelmed him. The noise, the lights, the endless faces. Kale had needed a moment to breathe, to clear his mind. He had always felt more at ease in places like this, where the world was still, where there were no expectations, no crowds, just the weight of his thoughts and the whispering of the trees. The distant hum of the fair felt like a ghost at his back, but here in the forest he could finally think clearly. But as he pushed further along the trail, something caught his eye, a figure, standing near the edge of a cluster of trees. For a moment, Kale froze. The figure was delicate, their silhouette soft against the wild backdrop of the forest. At first, Kale thought it might be a servant or a wandering noble, someone else who had sought solitude away from the festivities. But as he took another step, his gaze sharpened. The figure was not just any wanderer. It was a young man, an Omega, by the soft curves of his body and the grace in his movement. He seemed lost, as if wandering aimlessly with no direction, and there was something about his demeanor that caught Kale's attention. The Omega's hair, dark as midnight, cascaded over his shoulders in soft waves, and his features, though blurred by the distance, were delicate and ethereal. Kale, despite himself, felt a strange stir within him, an odd pull he couldn't explain. He had spent years training his mind to focus only on one thing, vengeance, and yet, this feeling, so foreign and unwelcome, gnawed at him. He was no stranger to beauty, to the allure of those around him, but this was something different. This Omega seemed untouched by the world's cruelty, and yet, at the same time, there was an unspoken sadness in his eyes, a quiet yearning. As he watched, the Omega took a step forward, his foot catching on something unseen in the underbrush. A sharp cry broke the silence, and Kale's instincts flared. The Omega stumbled, a cry of pain escaping his lips as he tumbled to the ground. Kale's heart raced. He had never been one for such gentleness, but something about this situation, this moment, pushed him into action. Without thinking, Kale moved toward the fallen figure, his hand reaching out instinctively as the Omega struggled to rise. The Omega winced as he tried to stand, clearly favoring one foot. Kale's sharp eyes caught the source of the pain. A thorn had embedded itself in the delicate flesh of the Omega's foot, its sharp tip buried deep. It was a simple wound, but the blood staining his pale skin, and the way the Omega winced in pain, stirred something within Kale that he couldn't ignore. "Hold still," Kale said, his voice rough, unaccustomed to offering comfort. He knelt down beside the Omega, his movements deliberate but careful. His hands, calloused and strong from years of training, hovered near the Omega's foot, uncertain for a moment. There was a pause, an odd silence between them, but Kale didn't wait for permission. He gently grasped the Omega's ankle, feeling the warmth of his skin, and began to extract a thorn from the wounded foot. The Omega gasped softly, flinching at the pain, but did not pull away. Kale's focus was entirely on the task at hand. As he removed the thorn, he felt the Omega's gaze on him, curious, yet wary, as though he too could sense the tension that hung in the air between them. "There," Kale muttered, his voice oddly soft. "It's out now." He pulled back, reluctant to touch the Omega any longer than necessary. His gaze flickered up to meet the Omega's, and for the first time in his life, Kale was struck speechless. The Omega's eyes, large and a soft shade of green, held something that Kale had never expected. There was no fear in them, no judgment, only a quiet acceptance that unsettled Kale. He had been prepared for hatred, for anger, for suspicion. But not this. Not this calm. The Omega blinked, as if pulled out of a trance. His voice, when he spoke, was like a melody, a soft, ethereal sound that seemed to soothe Kale's turbulent mind. "Thank you," he murmured. The words sweet and gentle, carrying an undertone of gratitude that resonated deep within Kale. Kale swallowed hard, his chest tightening at the sound. His response came out harshly, though he did not mean it to. "You should be more careful," he said gruffly, though the words felt empty in the face of the Omega's quiet grace. He stood, offering the Omega a hand to help him up. The Omega hesitated for a moment before accepting it, his slender fingers brushing against Kale's hand. The brief contact sent an unexpected jolt through Kale, though he quickly masked it with a hard look. "I didn't mean to disturb the festivities," the Omega said quietly, looking away. His voice had an almost apologetic tone, as though he had done something wrong by simply existing here. His eyes, still downcast, seemed lost in thought, as though he hadn't noticed the shift in Kale's demeanor. Kale took a slow breath, his mind clouded with 1,000 thoughts. Who was this Omega wandering the woods alone, seemingly lost? His presence was like a sudden storm in the calm of Kale's mind. "Are you lost?" Kale found himself asking, though the question seemed unnecessary. The Omega's delicate appearance, the grace in his movements, seemed at odds with the wilderness around them. He looked like someone who belonged in a palace, not in the solitude of the woods. The Omega glanced back up at Kale, his lips curving into a small, sad smile. "Perhaps," he said softly, his voice still carrying that strange, calming melody. "I was just trying to clear my head." Kale studied him for a long moment, feeling a strange pull in his chest. The Omega had no idea who Kale was, no reason to trust him. And yet there was something in the way their eyes met, a recognition of sorts, an unspoken bond, even if neither of them fully understood it. Kale stood there in the silence that followed, wondering what had brought them together in this moment. It could be nothing, or it could be something far more dangerous. "Leave you to your thoughts," Kale finally said, his voice low. He hesitated only a moment longer, then turned away, his mind still whirling with the encounter. The Omega watched him go, but Kale didn't turn back. And as he retreated into the forest, his mind was no longer consumed with thoughts of revenge. No, something had shifted inside him. Something about the Omega, their encounter, had left an impression on him that he couldn't ignore. The path ahead was still clear to him, but now, with the memory of those soft eyes and the echo of that melodic voice in his mind, he wasn't sure where the future would lead. It seemed the game had changed. Chapter 8. The Unexpected Connection. Kale's mind buzzed, swirling with thoughts he had no place for, emotions he had no use for. The Omega's soft eyes, the gentleness in his voice, the way his presence seemed to fill the air around him. All of it refused to leave Kale's mind. It was an odd sensation, one that he had not experienced in years. After all, he was a man forged in a world of vengeance, of brutality. He had built his life on the cold, unyielding pursuit of power. Yet, the moment their gazes met in the forest, something inside him had cracked, and it wasn't something Kale knew how to fix. Kale had left the fair behind, hoping that the solitude of the forest would grant him some clarity. But then, he had found the Omega, and everything had shifted. The tenderness with which he had helped the Omega, the way his hands had brushed against the Uda's delicate skin, the strange warmth that had spread through him at the Omega's gratitude. He couldn't shake it. And now, here he was, carrying the very source of his confusion back toward the palace. Elian, pale and silent, had collapsed in the forest, unable to stand on his injured foot. His delicate frame had been a shock against Kale's chest, his weight slight but somehow heavy in its own right. The instinct to protect, to shelter, had bubbled up inside Kale before he could stop it. And without thinking, he had scooped the Omega into his arms. Elian's head rested against Kale's shoulder as they made their way back to the palace, the gentle sway of Kale's steps smoothing out the tension that had built between them. His skin was soft, his breath warm against Kale's neck, and every breath he took seemed to stir something deep in Kale's chest, something he had long since buried. The palace, grand and imposing, rose before them as they reached the gates. The servants who had been waiting near the entrance rushed toward them, their expressions filled with concern as they noticed Elian's pale face and limp form. "Your Highness!" one of them exclaimed, rushing forward to take Elian from Kale's arms. "What happened? Is he—" Kale took a step back, his hands still hovering in the space where Elian had been cradled. He wasn't sure why he felt reluctant to let go. His gaze lingered on Elian, his thoughts a tangled mess. He should leave. He had no business staying, no reason to linger in this moment. He was here for one thing only, to fulfill his plan, to exact revenge on the kingdom that had wronged him. Elian was nothing more than a prince, a piece of the puzzle that Kale had never planned to involve himself with. But still, he didn't move. The servants gently took Elian from Kale's arms, and Kale stood there, watching, unable to tear his eyes away. Elian's face, pale and serene, was a picture of vulnerability, his delicate features framed by the dark strands of his hair that spilled over his brow. The Omega's eyes were closed now, but Kale could still see the quiet beauty of his face imprinted in his mind. A strange warmth spread through Kale's chest, unfamiliar and unwelcome. He shook his head slightly, as if to clear the thought. He had no time for distractions. This was not the life he had carved out for himself. He was here to destroy, to take back what had been stolen. The court, the royal family, none of them mattered. Elian certainly didn't. But the longer Kale stood there, watching the Omega being whisked away by the servants, the more that lingering warmth gnawed at him. There was something about this prince, something beyond his status or his role in the royal court. It wasn't just his beauty, or the way his presence seemed to fill every room. It was the way Elian had looked at him, so trusting, so unguarded. The way he had spoken to Kale as if he didn't know who Kale was, as if the world outside the forest didn't exist. Elian had no idea who Kale truly was. He had no knowledge of the hatred that burned inside Kale, of the plans that had been set in motion long before their paths had crossed. Elian was nothing more than a pawn, an Omega caught in the politics of the kingdom. And yet Kale couldn't seem to shake the feeling that this encounter had changed something between them. Something subtle, yet profound. As the servants hurried Elian inside, Kale remained rooted to the spot. His thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion and desire. Desire for what, exactly, he couldn't understand. The Omega was not a part of his plan. He had no place in the ruthless future Kale had mapped out for himself. And yet, the thought of Elian's soft eyes and melodic voice seemed to haunt him, pulling at his very core. He clenched his fists, trying to silence the strange pull he felt toward the Omega. He had no room for weakness, no time for distractions. Elian was just another piece on the chessboard, another potential ally, or obstacle, on the way to fulfilling Kale's ultimate goal. But as Kale turned away, ready to leave the palace grounds, a voice called out to him. "Wait." It was soft, almost lost in the wind, but Kale recognized it immediately. The voice, like a song, wrapped itself around his mind, and his feet froze in place. He turned slowly, meeting the gaze of the Omega, who had somehow made his way to the balcony overlooking the courtyard. Elian stood there, leaning slightly against the railing, his foot still bandaged from the injury Kale attended to. His eyes, wide and searching, met Kale's across the distance, and the world seemed to still for a moment. "Why did you help me?" Elian asked, his voice uncertain but filled with a quiet curiosity. He had an almost innocent air about him, as though the concept of betrayal or ulterior motives didn't even occur to him. It was this openness that struck Kale the most, and it unsettled him in a way he couldn't articulate. Kale's jaw tightened, his mind racing to find a response. He could say it was because the prince was a mere casualty of his plans, an unfortunate soul caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. But something in his chest pulled him in the other direction, urging him to tell the truth, or at least something closer to it. "I didn't want you to suffer," Kale finally said, his voice gruff but not unkind. "It's just instinct." There was a long silence between them, one filled with more unspoken words than either could name. Then Elian nodded, as if accepting Kale's explanation without question. "Thank you," Elian whispered, his voice still a soft melody in the air. Kale's chest tightened at the sincerity in the words. He nodded curtly, then turned away, but this time, the warmth in his chest didn't fade. It stayed with him, lingering, as if it had taken root somewhere deep within him. An unfamiliar sensation, one he wasn't sure he knew how to handle. As he walked away, Kale knew that the path he had chosen was no longer as clear as it had been before. Elian's soft eyes, his quiet kindness, these things had shifted something in Kale, something he had no control over, and it terrified him. Chapter 9. The King's Foreboding Prediction. King Alaric sat in his chambers, the weight of his years and failing health pressing down on him like an oppressive cloak. His once strong frame now seemed frail, his face hollowed by the relentless passage of time and the illness that had begun to rob him of his vitality. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for the goblet of wine by his bedside, but his mind was sharper than ever, and it was this sharpness that troubled him now. He had watched the royal fare from his private balcony, his eyes carefully trained on the interactions between his son, Elian, and the mysterious stranger who had entered their midst, Kale. The dark-haired young man, who had arrived at the fair under the guise of a noble guest, had like a shadow moved through the courtiers and dignitaries, unnoticed by many, but never truly out of King Alaric's sight. The king had seen the way Kale had looked at his son, how the two had shared a brief but telling encounter. It had been brief, yes, but it had been enough. Elian, ever the gentle soul, had always been the center of his father's hopes, the prince whose kindness and grace could one day heal the fractured kingdom. Elian had been groomed to rule, to bring peace where there had been conflict, and to unite a fractured court. And yet, despite King Alaric's best efforts to shelter his son, the world had a way of intruding, a way of twisting even the purest intentions into something far more dangerous. Kale was danger itself. The king's gaze flickered to the window, where the last of the sunset was fading into twilight. His thoughts were a mess of apprehension, his heart heavy with the knowledge that something was shifting within the kingdom, something he couldn't control. The way Kale had helped Elian in the forest, the way his presence had lingered even after their brief encounter. The king could feel it. Elian was drawn to Kale, like a moth to a flame, unaware of the darkness that flickered beneath the surface of the young man's intentions. The warmth that Kale had shown was not kindness. It was a calculated move, part of a greater plan that Alaric could not yet fully comprehend. King Alaric knew the history. He knew the hatred that Kale's father, Lord Arlen, had cultivated for years. A hatred that had led to the exile of Kale's mother and the destruction of Kale's family. The wounds of the past were deep, and Kale had been forged in that pain. Vengeance had become his only purpose, and now it seemed he had come for Elian. The king's hands tightened around the goblet. He had lived long enough to understand how fragile alliances could be, how quickly a bond could turn into a weapon. Elian, pure-hearted and naive as he was, could never see Kale for what he truly was. But King Alaric could. He had been there, had seen the cruelty in Lord Arlen's eyes, had heard the stories of Kale's rise to power. The prince, for all his beauty and kindness, was the very thing that Kale had longed for. A prize to be claimed, a kingdom to be toppled. The king's thoughts raced, but his body betrayed him. The effort of standing alone in his chambers, of trying to ward off the growing fear and dread in his chest, was too much. His vision blurred, and the room seemed to tilt as he gripped the side of the bed for support. He staggered, then sank down, barely catching himself before collapsing onto the thick rug beneath him. Breathing heavily, King Alaric closed his eyes, sweat beading on his forehead. His mind was clearer than ever, but his body, his aging, frail body, had begun to fail him. His time was running out, and with it, the hope that Elian might have the strength to resist the forces that Kale would surely bring to bear against them. A single thought consumed him. I cannot let Elian fall into Kale's grasp. But what could he do? His influence was fading, and Elian, naive and trusting, was already entangled in the web Kale had spun. Kale was no simple conqueror. He was a strategist, a man whose every action seemed to be calculated, whose every word was laced with purpose. The way he had helped Elian, the way he had lingered in the palace, these were no accidents. Kale was playing a game and Elian was a key piece. The king's mind turned again, seeking a way to stop the inevitable. But his body betrayed him once more, and a wave of weakness washed over him. The pain in his chest grew sharper, the darkness at the edges of his vision becoming impossible to ignore. His breathing became ragged as his vision blurred, and for a moment he wondered if he had already left the world behind. But no, not yet. Not while Elian was still in danger. Elian, he whispered, though his voice was barely audible, cracking with age and weariness. You must be strong. You must not trust him. The king's mind drifted then, to a time long ago, when he had been young and filled with ambition, before the years had stolen his strength, before the kingdom's wounds had festered. He had always been a man of power, a king who had once held the fate of entire nations in his hands. Now, he was a shadow of that ruler, powerless against the forces that sought to tear his kingdom apart. But even in his weakness, Alaric could not ignore the terrible truth. Kale was no ordinary enemy. He was the embodiment of vengeance, and once his eyes were fixed on something, he would stop at nothing to claim it. In his final moments, King Alaric could only hope that Elian, his son, would have the strength to face what was coming. But even as he clung to life, the king knew it was too late. The tides of fate had already begun to turn, and the kingdom's future was no longer in his hands. With one final breathless sigh, King Alaric sank back against the bed, his chest heavy with foreboding. The future had already been set in motion. Kale would come for Elian. And nothing, not even Alaric's dying wish, could change that. Chapter 10. The Revelation of the Letter. The weight of the day hung heavily on Kale's shoulders as he returned to his quarters. The royal fair, the fleeting moment with Elian, the encounter in the forest, it was all still fresh in his mind, swirling around him like an unwelcome storm. He had left the fair with more questions than answers, feeling a strange pull toward the Omega Prince that he couldn't explain or understand. The future was supposed to be clear, simple even. He was here for one thing, revenge. Yet, the closer he came to Elian, the more complicated that purpose became. As Kale entered his private chambers, the flickering candlelight illuminated the cold stone walls. His steps were heavy, the weight of his own thoughts making his movements slower than usual. His eyes scanned the room, an austere place, fit for a king in training but lacking the comforts one might expect for a man of his rank. His gaze landed on a small table by the window, where a sealed letter lay waiting. The sight of it struck him immediately. There was no mistaking the seal. It bore the crest of Elian's kingdom. The wax was a deep crimson, glistening faintly in the dim light. Kale felt his breath catch in his chest as he slowly approached the letter, his pulse quickening. He had not expected any correspondence, especially not from the royal family of the very kingdom he had sworn to destroy. The familiar insignia, the lion's head atop a crown, suddenly seemed like an omen, as though fate itself had thrust this letter into his hands, urging him toward a path he had yet to fully understand. He hesitated for only a moment before breaking the seal, unfolding the letter with a practiced hand. The weight of what was to come pressed down on him, yet he couldn't stop himself from reading the words that had been carefully inscribed. The letter was addressed to Kale directly. To the Honorable Prince Kale, we write to you with both respect and urgency. The matters of the past cannot be left unaddressed, and there are debts yet to be repaid. It is our deepest hope that you will consider the proposal enclosed with this letter, and understand the gravity of the decisions before you. The kingdom seeks an alliance, and we recognize the undeniable connection between our bloodlines. There are many things that must be said, but words alone cannot undo the wrongs of the past. May our future be shaped by understanding, rather than by vengeance. With sincere regard, King Varden of the Kingdom of Elian. Kale's fingers trembled slightly as he read the final words. His mind raced, a flood of memories crashing over him. The words on the page were innocuous enough, but the meaning behind them was far more dangerous. Debt, bloodlines, wrongdoings, it was all too much. King Varden's words, though diplomatic in tone, felt like a blade to Kale's heart. The letter was not merely a plea for an alliance, as it had initially seemed. It was a reminder of the past, a reminder of his father's betrayal of Elian's family, and of the consequences that had followed. Kale's heart pounded in his chest as the truth settled over him like a heavy cloak. He had known in the darkest corners of his mind that this day would come, the day when the past would resurface, and the sins of his father would demand retribution. But seeing the kingdom of Elian reach out to him, acknowledging the blood that ran between their families, it felt like a summons he could not refuse. Kale stood by the window, staring out into the moonlit night as the letter burned its image into his mind. His father, Lord Arlen, had long since poisoned their family with hatred and vengeance. But Kale had never known the full extent of the betrayal that had led to his mother's exile. He had been raised to seek revenge, but this was something deeper. The letter had revealed it all. King Varden's words confirmed what Kale had only suspected, that the kingdom of Elian had never forgiven his father's treachery. The enmity between the two royal families ran far deeper than he had known. And now, with the mention of bloodlines, Kale understood the full weight of the conflict. It wasn't just about vengeance, it was about legacy, about power, and about the very essence of who Kale was. His identity, his birthright, was intricately tied to the history of betrayal that had led to this point. The king's offer, though wrapped in the language of diplomacy, was not one of peace. It was a challenge to Kale, to his family, and to the future of his kingdom. They were offering him a chance to reconcile, to find understanding and, possibly, an alliance. But Kale could see through the mask of diplomacy. This was not a proposal of friendship, It was a way to bind him to the sins of his father, to trap him in a legacy of retribution. Kale's fists clenched, the letter crinkling in his grip. His eyes narrowed as he thought of Elian, gentle, innocent Elian, the Omega Prince who had unknowingly crossed paths with him in the forest. He had helped him, touched his life in a way that Kale had never anticipated. And now, it seemed that their destinies were entwined, whether Kale wanted it or not. But there was one thing Kale was certain of. The vengeance that had burned in his heart for so long would not be extinguished by the delicate words of a king who sought to balance his own kingdom's blood debt. No, Kale's plan would remain. His path to revenge had not shifted. If anything, this letter only confirmed what he had known from the start. He could not trust the kingdom of Elian, not when it was built on the same treacherous foundation his father had once laid. The flame of vengeance was still alive within him, burning hotter than ever. With a sharp motion, Kale tore the letter in half, casting the pieces aside. The fire of hatred, the need for retribution, it was the only thing that had ever truly driven him. And Elian, despite his kindness, despite the brief connection they had shared in the forest, was still nothing more than a pawn in Kale's larger game. The bloodline of his father's betrayal could not go unavenged. Elian's family would pay for the sins of the past, and Kale would be the one to see it done. His heart was set. The future would unfold as it had been written, and nothing would stand in the way of his revenge. Not even Elian. Chapter 11. The Plan Unfold. The moonlight streamed through the large arched windows of Kale's private chambers, casting a cold, pale glow across the room. The letter from King Varden, now torn into pieces, lay discarded on the floor. But its contents, the weight of its message, continued to swirl in Kale's mind, gnawing at him with an intensity that was impossible to ignore. The king's offer of an alliance was no more than a veil, an attempt to weave diplomacy into a tapestry of old wounds and lies. But it had done more than remind Kale of his father's betrayal. It had reaffirmed his purpose. Kale paced back and forth, his boots clicking against the stone floor with a rhythmic intensity. His jaw was set, his eyes burning with a fire that had only grown since the moment he had first learned of his family's betrayal. Elian was the key. He had always been the key. It was the realization that his plan had come full circle. Elian's royal blood, his very existence, was a tether that bound the two kingdoms together. Kale knew that Elian's life would be the final blow to the kingdom his father had once ruled, the catalyst that would bring everything crashing down. This was what he had been born for. Revenge. Kale stopped pacing, his chest rising and falling as he drew a deep breath. The path before him had never been clearer, though it was not without its risks. Elian, despite his softness, his beauty, was a weapon. One that Kale would use to carve out his father's legacy. If he could take Elian as a hostage, he would break the kingdom's will. The prince was too valuable, too beloved by the court, to be ignored. His capture would shatter the kingdom's resolve, forcing King Varden and the nobles to bow to Kale's power. Kale's fingers flexed, his hands itching to make the plan a reality. But he knew better than to act rashly. The king's court was a labyrinth of alliances, loyalties, and hidden motives. Elian might be a pawn, but his capture would not come without a cost. Kale needed allies, subtlety, and above all timing. He turned toward the map of the kingdom, pinned against the far wall of his chambers. The borders of Elian's kingdom and his own were close, and it was only a matter of time before his forces would cross into enemy territory. But Elian was not simply a pawn to be taken. No, Kale needed to ensure that the prince's capture was not just effective, but devastating. He needed to make Elian's capture a spectacle, a display of power that would send shockwaves throughout the kingdom. His mind turned to strategy. He could take Elian in the dead of night, when the prince's guards relax, when the royal family might be distracted by their own celebrations and concerns. But the risk was too great. A swift, unnoticed strike would not deliver the message he needed. Kale needed the court to see what he was doing, to witness the moment when Elian, their precious prince, was torn from their grasp. Subtlety can be a trap, Kale murmured to himself, thinking aloud as he examined the map. No, it has to be a statement. A ruthless smile crossed his lips as he formulated the plan in his mind. His forces would infiltrate the palace, strike quickly but decisively. They would take Elian in broad daylight during a public event when the entire court would be watching. He would strike at the very heart of the kingdom's pride. By taking the prince in front of the court, he would expose the fragility of their reign. The moment would be irreversible. Elian would be his, and the kingdom would know it. Kale's fingers traced the lines of the map, his eyes narrowed in calculation. There were only a few barriers left in his way. The guards around the prince, the security measures that the kingdom's elite had put in place. But none of it mattered. Elian was a prize too important to be left in the hands of those who didn't understand the danger they faced. His thoughts were interrupted by a quiet knock at the door. "Enter," Kale commanded, his voice cold and firm. The door creaked open, and a shadow stepped into the room. It was Eric, one of Kale's most trusted lieutenants. His eyes were sharp, his expression unreadable. He bowed low, his cloak swirling around him. "You summoned me, my lord?" Eric asked, his voice respectful but edged with the same cold efficiency that Kale had cultivated over the years. Kale looked up, his eyes flickering with the intensity of his thoughts. "It's time to move forward," he said, his voice steady but filled with an undeniable conviction. "I have a task for you." Eric's brow furrowed, though he said nothing, waiting for Kale to elaborate. "I need you to begin preparations," Kale continued, stepping away from the map and walking toward the table, where a series of plans and documents were neatly stacked. "We will take Elian. It will be a public affair. An event that will leave no doubt in anyone's mind that we are the rulers of this land now." Eric's eyes gleamed with understanding, and a small smile tugged at his lip. "You plan to strike at the heart of their court, then? A spectacle to break their spirit?" Kale nodded sharply. "Precisely. We will make an example of Elian. Once he is in our hands, they will have no choice but to bow to us. The kingdom will crumble, and when it does, I'll be the one holding the pieces." Eric's expression darkened, but there was a flicker of admiration in his eyes. "You sure about this, my lord? Once the prince is taken, there will be no going back. Elian is loved by many. His capture will ignite something in the court, perhaps even in the people." Kale's eyes narrowed, his jaw set with determination. "Let them come. I don't fear their rage. We're not just taking a prince, we're taking their future, and with it, we'll reshape this kingdom in our image." Eric nodded slowly, his mind already working through the logistic. "I'll make the necessary arrangements," he said, before bowing again. "It will be done." As Eric departed, Kale stood alone in the silence of his chambers, the plan now in motion. The stakes had never been higher, and the path ahead was fraught with peril. But Kale was ready. He had been preparing for this moment for years. Elian, for all his innocence, was the last obstacle between Kale and the kingdom he had always felt was rightfully his. And now the prince would become the catalyst for Kale's vengeance. His heart beat with cold certainty. The kingdom would fall, and Kale would rise. The plan was unfolding, and nothing would stand in his way. Chapter 12. A Desperate Plea. The grand hall of Elian's palace, once resplendent with the elegance of power and grace, now felt like a cage. The once bright tapestries that adorned the walls were heavy with dust, their colors fading in the shadow of impending doom. The halls echoed with the sound of hurried footsteps, the courtiers whispering in hushed tones, their nervous glances darting to the looming threat that was quickly approaching from across the borders. Kale's forces had crossed into Elian's kingdom days ago, moving with precision and stealth. His army had been swift, a shadow moving through the night. But now, it was no longer a secret. His presence was known. and with it, the fear that had slowly begun to spread among the people of Elian's court. The kingdom, fragile as it was, stood on the brink of collapse, and for all the strength King Varden had once commanded, his power had begun to crumble in the face of Kael's unrelenting ambition. In the heart of the palace, Prince Leander, Elian's older brother, sat in a darkened chamber, wringing his hands in quiet desperation. His cowardice was a well-known secret in the court, a fact that made him both pitied and dismissed by those who surrounded him. Leander, unlike Elian, had never been built for strength. He had always relied on his royal title, his family name, to protect him from the world's harsh realities. But now, that title meant nothing. The kingdom he had always taken for granted was teetering on the edge of ruin, and his father's kingdom was on the verge of falling to Kael's vengeance. Leander's heart raced, his mind a chaotic mess of fear and helplessness. He had always known that Kael would come for them, that vengeance would eventually seek them out. But now, with the kingdom in ruins, and Kael's army marching closer with every passing day, the truth was impossible to ignore. The end was near, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. His thoughts grew frantic, his hands trembling as he clutched the edge of his chair, eyes darting toward the door. He had to do something, anything, to save himself. A knock at the door broke his frantic reverie. He looked up quickly, his heart leaping in his chest. A servant entered, her face pale with fear, her eyes wide with panic. She hesitated only for a moment before speaking. "Your Highness," she said in a trembling voice. "Prince Kael, he is here." Leander's stomach sank. He had been dreading this moment, knowing that Kael's arrival would signal the end of everything he had known. The air seemed to grow colder around him, and his breath became shallow as he stood from his chair, his mind racing for a way out. "Take me to him," he said, his voice barely a whisper, barely holding together. He wasn't prepared for this. He had never been prepared for this. But there was no other choice. The servant led him through the winding halls of the palace, her steps quick, though she too was visibly shaking. As they reached the throne room, Leander felt his legs grow weak beneath him. The doors to the chamber were open, and the sight beyond them was enough to stop him in his track. Prince Kael stood before the throne, his presence a force of nature. His black cloak hung from his broad shoulders, and his piercing gaze cut through the air like a blade. He was flanked by a few of his most trusted soldiers, their armor gleaming in the dim light. The soldiers stood at attention, their expressions cold and unyielding. King Varden sat on his throne, his frail body barely propped up by the cushions beneath him. His face, once full of command, was now pale and lined with age, his once sharp eyes clouded with illness and fear. The room was thick with tension, the air heavy with the weight of what was to come. Kael stood in front of him, unflinching, his eyes never leaving the king's weakened form. Leander's breath caught in his throat as Kael's gaze shifted to him. It was the kind of gaze that could break a man, a gaze that saw past everything, down to the very core of who he was. Kael knew what Leander was, weak, cowardly, a prince who had never truly earned his title. A man who had lived a life of comfort, surrounded by luxury, but who had never known the strength or resolve to face the true challenges of his world. "Prince Leander," Kael's voice rang out, cold and unfeeling. "The man who would rule a kingdom, yet has no spine to defend it." Leander recoiled at the words, the sting of Kael's condemnation striking him harder than any blade could. His knees buckled slightly and he had to steady himself against the doorframe. He had never been good at handling pressure, but this was different. This was no passing threat. This was a reckoning. I beg of you," Leander stammered, his voice shaking. He dropped to his knees before Kael, the weight of the moment crashing down on him. His hands, once proud and royal, now trembled as he reached out, desperate. "Please, spare us. Spare me. You can take the throne. You can have everything. Just don't destroy my family." Kale stared down at him, his eyes unreadable. There was no sympathy, no mercy in them. Kale had long since abandoned any notion of kindness, and the sight of Leander, pathetic, begging for his life, only further solidified Kale's resolve. "You should have cared about your kingdom when it still had a chance," Kale said coldly. "Your father's reign has crumbled. Your kingdom is mine for the taking. You're nothing more than a weak, worthless prince, and your pleas mean nothing." Leander's chest heaved as his breath grew more ragged. The weight of Kale's words crushed him. The truth of it all, the fact that he had never been prepared for this, never been ready to face the consequences of his family's choices, was overwhelming. He had failed. His entire life had been a lie, a facade built on luxury and inherited power, and now it was all unraveling. I didn't know," Leander whispered, his voice hoarse. "I never knew how to lead. Please, I'm begging you. Spare me and I'll do anything you ask. I'll give you whatever you want. Just don't take everything from me." Kale looked down at the prince, his face impassive, his emotions unreadable. He could almost feel pity for the man before him, the broken, cowardly prince who had never once thought to stand for something. But that pity didn't last long. There was no room for mercy in Kale's heart, not for Leander, and certainly not for anyone who had failed to stop his father's treachery. Kale leaned in closer, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Your family has already paid the price for your weakness, Leander. There is nothing left for you. There is no mercy here." Leander's body shook with fear, his mind unraveling as Kale's cold words pierced through him like daggers. He had been nothing his whole life, a prince born to a throne he was never meant to hold, a coward who could only beg for his life. And now, with Kale's cold gaze fixed upon him, he knew that his fate was sealed. But Kale was not done. He straightened, turning away from Leander's pitiful form, his gaze shifting back to King Varden. "Your kingdom is already lost," Kale said flatly, "and there is nothing you can do to stop me. Your son's pleas are nothing more than the dying gasps of a kingdom too proud to see its own collapse." As the words echoed in the hall, Leander's last shred of hope evaporated. He had failed, and now Kale's wrath would fall upon them all. The plan was in motion, and nothing would stop Kale from claiming his revenge. Not even the desperation of a man who had never understood what it meant to truly rule. Chapter 13. The Siege of the Kingdom. The sun had barely begun to rise, casting a pale light across the kingdom of Elion. The peaceful beauty of the morning was a cruel irony, for the kingdom was not waking up in peace, it was waking up to the thundering sounds of war. Kale's army, swift and unforgiving, had breached the borders in the dead of night, moving like a storm on the horizon. Word spread quickly, and panic spread even faster. The royal palace, a symbol of Elion's long-standing power, now trembled under the weight of an invasion that seemed inevitable, unstoppable. Kale's forces had swept through the countryside with brutal efficiency. The soldiers were loyal, ruthless, and well-trained, fearless in the face of the kingdom's defenses. The walls that had once stood tall and proud against invaders were now being battered down with siege weapons. The sound of war cries, clashing swords, and the explosion of stone and iron filled the air, drowning out the cries of a kingdom caught in the throes of destruction. Inside the palace, chaos reigned. Courtiers scrambled to flee, servants ran through the halls in a frenzy, their feet skittering against the polished floors. The once immaculate halls, filled with lavish tapestries and gilded furniture, now held the smell of smoke and blood. King Alaric, weakened and frail from years of illness, had summoned his remaining strength. His breath came in shallow, desperate gasps, but he was determined to fight for the kingdom's survival. For his son, Elion. "Your Highness, the gates will not hold," one of the generals said, his voice shaking. He had been a loyal servant to the king for years, but now, standing at the threshold of defeat, he could barely hide the terror in his eyes. "We have to retreat. There is no hope of victory." King Alaric shook his head, his grip tightening on the hilt of his sword. "I will not abandon my kingdom. I will not leave my son to be crushed by this bastard's vengeance." His voice was hoarse, but there was still a fire in it, a spark of the king he had once been. He stood tall, as best as he could, though the weight of his age and illness made his movements slow and laborious. Elian, standing in the corner of the room, watched his father with wide eyes. The fear that gripped him was almost suffocating. He could see the struggle in King Alaric's face, the pain, the exhaustion. But his father was still trying to hold on to the kingdom that had already begun to slip through his fingers. "Father, you cannot fight this alone," Elian said softly, his voice breaking. "Please, please let me help you." But Alaric only shook his head again, his steely eyes narrowing with resolve. "There is no help, Elian. There is only survival. We fight to the end. You must survive. You are the future." Elian's heart twisted with anguish. His father's words felt like a final goodbye. He had always looked up to King Alaric. He had always believed in his father's strength. And yet now, as the kingdom crumbled around them, Elian felt an overwhelming sense of helplessness. From the balcony, Elian could see the smoke rising from the distant gates, the dark clouds swirling above the palace. The siege was relentless, and Kael's forces were growing stronger by the minute. And then, the doors to the throne room burst open with a force that shook the walls. Kael entered, flanked by his soldiers, his black cloak billowing around him like a shadow. His eyes were cold and unwavering, focused solely on the throne where King Alaric stood. Kael Alaric spat, his voice hoarse, but still filled with the king's defiance. "You've come for the throne. I will not give it to you." Kael's lips curled into a faint, almost mocking smile. "You have no choice, old man. The throne has already been taken. All that remains is your blood." A hush fell over the room. Elian could feel his heart stop in his chest. He had never seen Kael so close, so real. The man who had haunted his dreams, whose presence had always been a shadow at the edge of his thoughts, was now standing before him, his gaze fixed on his father. Alaric, though weakened, stood tall, sword in hand. His grip was shaking, but his eyes burned with defiance. "Do we?" Alaric said, his voice thick with emotion. "Finish what your father started. But know this, you will never break me, Kael. You will never break the legacy of this kingdom." Kael's eyes darkened. Without a word, he stepped forward, his hand moving swiftly to the hilt of his own blade. The soldiers behind him stepped aside, watching silently as their leader moved closer to the aging king. "Elian," Alaric whispered, his voice shaking, "you must survive. You must take what's left of this kingdom and rebuild it. You must." But Kael was already upon him. In one swift motion, Kael drew his sword, the cold steel glinting in the dim light of the throne room. His strike was precise, clean, and unforgiving. The blade cut through the air, a flash of silver in the space between them. Elian's breath caught in his throat. Time seemed to slow as he watched Kael's sword descend. His father, his king, fell to the floor with a sickening thud. Blood pooled around him, a dark stain on the golden carpet. King Alaric's eyes, wide with shock and pain, remained locked on Kael for a brief moment before they flickered, then closed. Elian's heart shattered. "No!" Elian screamed, rushing toward his father's fallen form, but he was too late. His knees hit the ground beside King Alaric's body, his hands trembling as he reached for his father's lifeless hand. The coldness of death already seeped into the king's skin. Kael stood behind him, watching with cold, detached eyes as Elian grieved. His face was unreadable, but his eyes gleamed with a cruel satisfaction. He had done it. The king was dead, and now the kingdom would fall into his grasp. Elian's chest heaved with broken sobs, his entire body shaking as he clung to his father's body. The world around him had fallen away. Nothing existed except the gaping hole in his heart, the crushing weight of loss. Get up, Elian. Kale's voice cut through the silence, icy and unfeeling. You're not dead yet, but you will be soon enough if you don't listen. Elian looked up, his face streaked with tears, his eyes wild with grief and fury. You killed him. You killed my father. His voice was hoarse, broken, as if the words themselves were too much for him to bear. Kale's lips curled into a faint, cruel smile. Your father was weak. He refused to see what needed to be done, and now I have his kingdom. He stepped closer, his eyes never leaving Elian's tear-streaked face. As for you, Elian, you're nothing but a symbol now, a pawn to complete my revenge. Elian's body trembled, his heart ripped in two by the coldness in Kale's voice. I hate you, he spat, his voice a whisper of despair. I hate everything you stand for. Kale's smile faded, his gaze hardening. You'll learn to love what I stand for, Elian. In time you'll see that everything I've done has been for a reason, for power, for vengeance, and for a new kingdom. With a final dismissive glance, Kale turned and walked away, leaving Elian kneeling beside his father's lifeless body. His kingdom was falling, and with it, everything Elian had ever known. The weight of his grief threatened to drown him, but as he looked up at Kale's retreating form, a spark of defiance kindled within him. Elian would not let Kale's cruelty be the end. He couldn't, but for now, all he could do was mourn. The siege had taken its toll, and the kingdom of Elian had fallen. Chapter 14. The Harsh Reality. The palace of Kale's kingdom was a place of gilded splendor, where marble floors echoed with the footfalls of nobles and the air carried the scent of rosewater and ambition. Yet for Elian, it was a prison of polished stone and silent judgment. The moment Kale's iron grip closed around his wrist, dragging him through the grand halls, Elian knew there was no escape. His heart, once a storm of defiance, had been subdued into a hollow drumbeat. The weight of Kale's presence pressed against him like a shadow, suffocating and inevitable. The servants, a cluster of sycophantic attendants, moved with synchronized precision, their hands deft as they stripped Elian of his outer garment. His fine robes, once a symbol of his own kingdom's dignity, were replaced with the silken undergarments of Kale's court, a gesture of submission, or perhaps a mockery of it. Elian stood still, his muscles coiled with tension, as the chamber was prepared. A canopy bed, its canopy draped in crimson velvet, loomed at the center of the room. The scent of jasmine and incense filled the air, a fragrant illusion of serenity that did little to ease the storm within him. Kale entered with the confidence of a man who had already won the battle. His smirk was sharp, his eyes gleaming with a mix of amusement and calculation. You'll thank me in the morning, he murmured, his voice a low, velvet caress. After all, you've been through so much. Elian's lips curled into a bitter smile. You think this is gratitude? This is a cage, a chain, a punishment. Kale chuckled, stepping closer. You're right. It's all of those things, but it's also your chance to be whole again, to forget the pain of your exile. Elian's gaze flicked to the bed, then back to Kale. Whole? You mean you'll break me again just to rebuild me in your image? The words hung between them, sharp as a blade. Kale's smirk deepened, but his eyes held a flicker of something darker, perhaps regret, or maybe just the thrill of power. You'll learn to see it as salvation, he said, his hand brushing against Elian's cheek. And when you do, you'll be mine. The room seemed to close in around Elian as Kale's servants arranged the final touches. A soft glow from the chandeliers above cast long shadows across the floor, and the faint sound of lute music drifted from a nearby chamber. It was a wedding night, a celebration of union and conquest, and Elian was the prize. Kale's touch was relentless. He undressed Elian slowly, each movement deliberate, as if he were carving his name into the man's skin. Elian's breath hitched, not from fear but from the memory of their last encounter. his kingdom's fall, the betrayal, the anguish. Kale's hands were cold as they slid beneath his body, lifting him onto the bed. The silk beneath him was cool, the sheets whispering against his skin like a promise of something more. But Elian's mind was a battlefield. He had resisted not with words but with every fiber of his being. His body trembled, not from surrender, but from the fight within. Kale's strength was unmatched, yes, but Elian's will was unyielding. He would not let himself be broken again. Not by Kale's touch, not by the palace's beauty, not by the softness of the night. Kale climbed onto the bed, his presence a warm weight against Elian's back. The moment their bodies pressed together, Elian's heart clenched. He could feel Kale's breath against his neck, the scent of sandalwood and ambition mingling with the jasmine in the air. It was a scent he had come to hate. "You're so small," Kale whispered, his voice a low rumble as he kissed the curve of Elian's shoulder. "So fragile. I could crush you, but I choose to make you mine." Elian's fingers curled into the sheets, his nails digging into the fabric. "You'll crush me anyway. You always have." Kale's laughter was a sound that sent a shiver through Elian's spine. "You're right, I have, but tonight you'll see it as a gift." The room was silent except for the sound of their bodies moving together. Kale's strength was a constant reminder of his dominance, his touch both gentle and forceful, as if he were sculpting Elian into something new. Elian's resistance was a whisper, a flicker of defiance in his eyes, but it was no match for Kale's relentless will. He could feel the heat of Kale's body, the sweat of their union, the way the palace seemed to hum with the rhythm of their connection. It was a moment of intimacy, but Elian's heart remained a fortress. He had made his decision the moment Kale first laid eyes on him in the ruins of his kingdom. He would never forgive Kale for what he had done. The night stretched on, each moment a blade against Elian's resolve. Kale's hands moved with practiced ease, his lips finding the curve of Elian's neck, his fingers tracing the lines of his body. Elian's breath was shallow, his pulse a frantic drumbeat against his ribs. He could feel the weight of the palace pressing down on him, the soft glow of the chandeliers above, the distant sound of voices from the halls, and still he held on. Kale's strength was unmatched, but Elian's will was a fire that would not be extinguished. He clenched his jaw, his fingers digging into the mattress, his heart aching with the memory of betrayal. He had once believed in Kale, had trusted him with his kingdom, his life, his soul. And now, he was bound to him in the most intimate way, a prisoner of both body and spirit. The act was complete, and Kale's smile widened as he pulled back, his eyes meeting Elian's. "You're mine now," he said, his voice thick with satisfaction. "No more running." Chapter 15. The cruelty begins. The days bled into one another, each one feeling like a continuation of the last. Endless, suffocating, filled with nothing but the heavy weight of Kale's power over Elian. Elian's heart remained broken, but something else was beginning to stir within him, a quiet, unyielding resolve. The pain, the grief, the humiliation. They were all part of the price he paid for surviving. And though his soul cried out for escape, he refused to bend. But Kale was relentless. From the moment Elian had been brought into his kingdom, Kale treated him like a servant, a mere tool to be used and discarded at will. His presence in the palace, once seen as a symbol of defeat, was now a cruel reminder of Kale's victory. Every interaction with Kale felt like a reminder of his helplessness. The tasks he was forced to perform, the way Kale's eyes would linger on him with a cold, calculated gaze, they all served as daily punishments, each more dehumanizing than the last. Kale would summon Elian without warning, barking orders at him, forcing him to bend to his will. Elian would do as he was told, silent, his pride broken, his heart bruised. But in his silence, there was always a quiet rebellion, a quiet defiance. He had long since lost his family, but he would never lose himself. "Bring me my wine," Kale would demand, his tone sharp and commanding, his gaze unwavering. Alien would set the goblet down with a bow, feeling the weight of Kale's eyes on him, but never once daring to meet them. Kale's presence in those moments was suffocating, his power all-encompassing. On other days, Kale would be even crueler. He would summon Alien to his chambers, ordering him to stand before him while he enjoyed the sight of Alien's discomfort. Every movement of Alien's was scrutinized, every gesture marked by Kale's judgment. The silence between them was oppressive, thick with unspoken words and unshed tears. Yet, no matter how cruel Kale became, no matter how deep the humiliation ran, Alien refused to let him see the extent of his pain. There was a fire in his heart that refused to be snuffed out, though Kale's cruelty threatened to suffocate it. But something strange was happening inside Kale. The more he treated Alien with contempt, the more he found himself inexplicably drawn to the Omega. It was a feeling Kale could not understand, a tension he could not explain. There was a vulnerability in Alien, a quiet dignity even in the face of Kale's cruelty, that stirred something inside him, something unfamiliar. He would find himself staring at Alien longer than necessary, his thoughts clouded by the Omega's presence. He would hear the soft, muffled sobs that escaped Alien's lips in the dead of night, and though his mind told him to ignore them, to dismiss them as nothing more than weakness, something deep inside him ached in response. He would watch Alien's tears in silence, his throat tight with a feeling he couldn't quite name. At first he would feel anger that Alien had the audacity to grieve in his presence, anger that he was not able to control the Omega's emotions. But the anger always gave way to something else, something Kale couldn't shake: frustration, confusion. At times, he would storm away from the room, unable to understand why Alien's suffering affected him so deeply. He would convince himself it was weakness, nothing more, but deep down, he knew that was a lie. The pull, the strange connection, could not be ignored. Kale would tell himself that it was simply because Alien was a reminder of everything he had lost: his mother, his childhood, his chance for something better. But even in his anger, he couldn't silence the truth. Kale was drawn to Alien, and he hated it. One evening, Kale found himself alone in the grand hall, the weight of the crown on his brow feeling heavier than usual. His thoughts were clouded, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, something deep inside him that he couldn't quell. He hadn't summoned Alien that day, and the silence in the palace felt too loud. The absence of the Omega's presence, no matter how much he told himself it was a relief, was unsettling. Kale strode to the balcony, his fingers gripping the cold stone railing as he looked out over his kingdom. The moon was high in the sky, casting its pale light over the sprawling landscape. And yet, no matter how vast his empire was, no matter how many battles he had won, Kale felt an emptiness that had nothing to do with power, nothing to do with conquest. Alien, he muttered under his breath. The name was like a poison on his tongue, a reminder of his own weakness. His mind wandered back to the way Alien had looked the last time they had been alone together. How he had stood there, his posture straight, despite everything, refusing to give Kale the satisfaction of breaking. Kale clenched his jaw. His pulse quickened. What was it about Alien that stirred him so deeply? Why did he feel this strange gnawing ache in his chest every time he saw him? And then, as if in answer to his unspoken thoughts, the doors to the balcony opened, and Alien stepped inside, his expression unreadable, his eyes downcast. Kale's gaze lingered on him. The Omega's presence was like a storm, the tension between them thickening the air. "Alien," Kale said, his voice sharp, but there was a note of something softer, something almost unsure. "I didn't call for you." Alien raised his eyes to meet Kale's, and for a moment, the defiance in them took Kale by surprise. But it was more than that. Elian's gaze was full of something else, something that was as old as the pain in Kale's heart. "You never have to call for me," Elian replied, his voice steady, though his eyes held a quiet sadness. "I am here because you need me. You've always needed me." Kale's heart skipped a beat at the words, and for a moment, it felt like everything inside him froze. The words didn't make sense, but they cut through him like a blade. "Don't speak of things you don't understand," Kale growled, his anger flaring once again. But Elian didn't flinch. He stood there, his eyes unwavering. "I understand more than you think," Elian said, his voice quiet but firm. "You may have conquered my kingdom, Kale, but you have never conquered me." The words hung in the air between them, thick with unspoken tension. Kale felt the stirrings of something inside him, something that had no place in the world he had built. It was an uncomfortable feeling, vulnerable, foreign, and he hated it. He wanted to lash out, to silence Elian's defiance with force. But as he looked at the Omega before him, he found that he couldn't. Instead, Kale turned away, his heart heavy, conflicted. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't sure what he wanted. And that, more than anything else, frightened him. In the silence of the palace, Elian watched Kale's retreating back, his heart filled with a quiet resolve. He had survived the worst of it, and though Kale's cruelty would continue, Elian would not break. Not for Kale. Not for anyone. The game had changed, and Elian would make sure that Kale would learn what it truly meant to have something to lose. Chapter 16. The Escape Attempt. The walls of Kale's fortress felt like they were closing in on Elian with every passing day. His heart, though heavy with grief, still beat with a quiet defiance. He had lost so much already, his father, his kingdom, his dignity. But there was one thing he refused to lose: his will to escape. He had spent days, perhaps weeks, in this prison, this cold stone mausoleum that was meant to be a palace. The silence was oppressive, the cruelty unrelenting. Kale treated him as little more than a possession, an object to be used at will. The humiliation, the endless degradation, had taken its toll on Elian's spirit, but it had not completely broken him. The idea of escape had been simmering in Elian's mind for days. He could no longer stand the suffocating confinement of his quarters, the constant surveillance, the reminder that he was nothing more than a prize to be claimed. He knew it was dangerous, that Kale would punish him severely if he were caught, but the alternative, living out his days in this cold, lonely cage, was worse than death itself. Late one night, as the palace settled into an eerie quiet, Elian made his move. The guards outside his quarters had grown complacent, and the shadows offered him a momentary cover. He had memorized the layout of the palace during his time here, noting every corner, every passage. He knew where the secret exits were, places where the servants would slip in and out, unseen by the royal eyes. He crept from his bed, his heart pounding in his chest. His bare feet made no sound against the cold stone floor as he moved toward the door. His breath was shallow, a mixture of fear and anticipation. The air felt thick, as though the palace itself was holding its breath, waiting to see if Elian would succeed or fail. When he reached the door, he hesitated, his hand hovering over the handle. For a moment, doubt crept into his mind. What if he was caught? What if Kale found out, and the punishment was worse than he could imagine? But the thought of remaining a prisoner, of being Kale's captive forever, pushed him forward. He had to try. With a quiet click, the door opened. Elian slipped out, careful not to make a sound. The hall was dark, illuminated only by the faint glow of torches. He moved quickly, blending into the shadows, his heart racing with each step. His mind was focused, each thought consumed by the need to get away, to run as far as he could from Kale and the life that had been forced upon him. He reached the narrow servants' corridor that led to the back of the palace, where the garden gate stood just beyond. The promise of freedom was so close, he could almost taste it. His feet quickened, driven by the hope that he might finally escape the nightmare. But then the sound of footsteps, heavy, deliberate, echoed down the corridor behind him. Elian froze. His blood ran cold. His heart seemed to stop beating for a moment as he pressed his back to the wall, trying to conceal himself in the darkness. He held his breath, praying that whoever was approaching wouldn't see him. But his prayers went unanswered. "Running away, Elian?" The voice that cut through the silence was low, rich with irony and disdain. "Kael dad." Elian's heart dropped. He turned slowly, his body stiff with fear, and found Kael standing at the end of the corridor, his eyes gleaming with cold amusement. "How long did you think you could escape?" Kael's voice was like ice, cutting through the air. He stepped forward, his presence overwhelming, a dark shadow that seemed to swallow the light. "Did you honestly believe you could just slip away unnoticed?" Elian's mouth went dry, but he refused to show the fear that surged through him. "I couldn't stay," he said, his voice shaking only slightly. "I won't live like this, Kael. You've taken everything from me. I'd rather die than stay in this prison." Kael regarded him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Elian held his ground, despite the tremor in his heart. For all his defiance, he knew he couldn't outrun Kael. Not here, not now. "Death is a release you don't deserve, Elian," Kael replied coldly. "But you'll get something far worse than death, a life where you are nothing but a reminder of my triumph, a life where you'll never be free again." Before Elian could respond, Kael's soldiers emerged from the shadows, surrounding him with practiced precision. They seized him by the arms, pulling him back toward the palace. Elian resisted, but their grip was too strong. They dragged him through the corridors, ignoring his attempts to break free. His body was bruised from the struggle, his breath ragged as he was forced back to the cold, prison-like room that had been his cage for so long. Kael walked behind him, his gaze never leaving Elian. He watched with cold satisfaction as Elian was thrown back into his quarters, the door slamming shut behind him with a finality that reverberated through Elian's bones. Elian stood there, panting, his body trembling from the effort, his heart aching with defeat. But even in the midst of his failure, there was something in his chest that refused to be extinguished. His resolve had only grown stronger, even as his body was broken and his spirit was crushed under the weight of Kael's power. He had tried. He had fought for his freedom, even though the odds were against him. And that, in itself, gave him something Kael couldn't take away: hope. Kael's cruelty, his punishment, was inevitable. Elian knew that now. But so was his refusal to give in, his refusal to accept a life of humiliation and subjugation. The escape had been short-lived, but it had shown Elian something powerful: the strength to resist. He had fought with everything he had, even if it hadn't been enough. In the darkness of his room, Elian sank to his knees, tears blurring his vision. He had failed, yes, but he would not let Kael break him. He couldn't. Even in captivity, even with the weight of his loss pressing down on him, Elian knew that there was still something worth fighting for: himself. And no matter how cruel Kael became, no matter how much power he had, Elian would not let him take that away. As the days passed, Elian's spirit would grow dimmer, his will tested by the unrelenting cruelty that Kael inflicted upon him. But the quiet fire of defiance still burned deep inside him, a flicker of hope that refused to be extinguished. Kael, for all his power, could not control that. And it was that knowledge that kept Elian going, one day at a time. Chapter 17. The confrontation with Kael's mother. The palace was silent, save for the soft rustle of the evening breeze that filtered through the high arched windows. Elian wandered the corridors aimlessly, his mind heavy with the weight of his captivity, of everything he had lost. Every corner of this place reminded him of his own helplessness. But there was one place he had always avoided: the hallway adorned with portraits of Kael's family. He had never dared look at them before, not wanting to be reminded of the man who had destroyed his life. But tonight, something within him urged him forward, his steps taking him down the dimly lit hall, where the flickering torchlight cast long shadows on the walls. At the far end of the corridor, framed by golden wood, was a portrait that stood out among all the others. It was an image of Kale's late mother, Seraphina, the woman whose love had been the catalyst for all the pain Elian now endured. The woman who had been exiled, left to die alone in a forgotten house, her only legacy the son who sought vengeance for her death. Elian stopped in front of the portrait, staring at the serene expression on Seraphina's face. Her eyes, painted with such care, seemed almost alive, gazing out from the canvas with a quiet sorrow. It was a beauty that had once captivated King Alaric, and in the end had led to his betrayal of Kale's mother and the destruction of Elian's own kingdom. Elian's chest tightened as his mind churned with unanswered questions. Why? Why had all of this happened? He had been born into a world of power and privilege, but now, in the wake of the devastation, he found himself a prisoner in a foreign land, caught in the aftermath of his father's past mistakes. Kale, too, had been a victim of his father's actions. Yet, in his pursuit of revenge, he had become a force of cruelty, and Elian could not understand it. His voice, a mere whisper, broke the silence in the hall. "Why?" he asked the portrait. "Why is this my punishment? Why must I suffer for the sins of my father?" The question hung in the air, unanswered, but Elian wasn't done. His heart burned with frustration, the anger and grief boiling over. Why does Kale do this? Why does he cling to vengeance like it's the only thing left? What did my father ever do to him? Elian's eyes lingered on the portrait of Seraphina. Her face, though painted with such beauty, seemed to hold a deep, painful sorrow. He didn't know her, couldn't know her really. All he had was this image, this silent witness to the tragedy that had unfolded. And yet, there was a connection he couldn't shake. "Kale," Elian continued, his voice growing softer, "what does your mother's death truly mean to you? Why have you made it the center of everything? You lost so much, but why does that mean I must lose it all too?" He paused, swallowing the lump in his throat, before continuing, his words laced with more pain than he had intended. "Why do you have to punish me? I'm not my father. I never betrayed you. Why do you think breaking me will bring your mother back?" Elian's voice faltered and he turned away, no longer able to look at the portrait. His heart was heavy, and he felt the sting of tears threatening to spill. But he refused to shed them. He would not give Kale the satisfaction of seeing his pain. The sound of footsteps broke the stillness, and Elian tensed. He turned quickly to find Kale standing in the doorway, his presence filling the space with a cold, oppressive weight. For a moment neither of them spoke. Kale's gaze was fixed on Elian, unreadable, his expression guarded. Elian took a deep breath, his body stiffening as he faced the man who had been the architect of his suffering. He had not expected Kale to be here, hadn't expected him to overhear his words. But now that he was, Elian found himself unable to look away. "You heard me?" Elian asked, his voice softer than he intended, but with a quiet edge. Kale didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped into the room, his gaze still fixed on Elian, piercing and calculating. His jaw tightened, and for a moment, it seemed as though the weight of Elian's words had actually affected him, though he quickly masked it behind a veil of indifference. "You speak of things you don't understand," Kale finally said, his voice low and controlled, but with a subtle edge of vulnerability beneath it. Elian's heart pounded, a mixture of frustration and confusion churning inside him. "I'm trying to understand, Kale," he replied. "I don't want to fight you. I don't want to be your prisoner, but I can't keep pretending that this life you forced on me is somehow justified. I didn't hurt you. I didn't kill your mother. I didn't destroy your life. But here I am, paying the price for sins I didn't commit." Kale's gaze softened just slightly, but only for the briefest of moments. He took a step closer, his eyes flicking to the portrait of his mother, and then back to Elian. "My mother." His voice trailed off, as though the words were suddenly difficult to say. "You don't know what she meant to me. She was everything, and my father, he destroyed her, destroyed us. I had no choice but to seek revenge." Elian's chest tightened at Kale's words, the pain that was buried so deep inside the man suddenly surfacing in the vulnerability in his eyes. It was a moment of rare honesty, a crack in Kale's armor, one that Elian could not ignore. He had been so focused on his own suffering that he had forgotten that Kale was a victim too. A victim of betrayal, of a world that had taken everything from him. "You're not your father, Kale," Elian said quietly, taking a step closer. "You don't have to continue this path of destruction. You've already taken so much, but it doesn't have to end like this. It doesn't have to consume you." Kale's expression hardened again, but there was a flicker of something else there, something Elian couldn't quite place. He watched as Kale clenched his fists, his posture stiffening, as though trying to shake off the moment of weakness that had threatened to unravel him. "I don't know how to stop," Kale said finally, his voice rough, like the words were unwilling to leave his throat. "I don't know how to let go." Elian's heart twisted with sympathy, even as his anger simmered beneath the surface. "You're not alone, Kale. You never have been. But this vengeance, it's tearing you apart, and it's tearing me apart too." For a moment, there was silence between them, an unspoken understanding that neither of them could fully comprehend. The tension in the room hung heavy, the air thick with the weight of their shared suffering. And then, Kale turned away. He moved toward the door, but before he left, he spoke one final time, his voice quieter than it had been before. "Don't speak of things you don't understand, Elian," he said, his tone less harsh, but still laced with pain. "You've lost much, yes, but you don't understand what it's like to lose everything and have no way to get it back." The door closed with a soft click, and Elian was left standing in front of the portrait of Serafina, her silent gaze still watching over him. The conversation had left him with more questions than answers, but there was one thing he knew for certain. Kale was not the monster he had imagined. He was a man, broken, lost, and desperate for a way to heal, even if he couldn't see it himself. And somewhere, deep down, Elian still believed that there was a chance for both of them to find redemption. But whether Kale would allow it, or whether Elian could survive long enough to see it, was still unknown. Chapter 18. A New Perspective. The days following the confrontation in the portrait hall were long and heavy, weighed down by the silence that had settled between Kale and Elian. Though Kale tried to ignore it, Elian's words lingered in his mind, echoing in the hollowed chambers of his heart. "You don't have to continue this path of destruction. You've already taken so much, but it doesn't have to consume you." Those words were like a wound that refused to heal. They had cut deeper than Kale was willing to admit, lodging themselves in the places he kept buried, the parts of himself he kept hidden beneath layers of anger and cold resolve. For years, Kale had justified his actions, convincing himself that his pursuit of vengeance was necessary, that his mother's death demanded a price, a reckoning. He had sworn to make the world pay for what had been taken from him. But now, with Elian's pain reflected in his eyes, Kale began to question everything. His desire for retribution had become his obsession, the sole reason he had lived for so long. He had convinced himself that vengeance would heal him, that it would fill the emptiness left by Serafina's loss. But now, as he sat alone in his chambers, staring out at the kingdom he had conquered, Kale realized something he had been blind to for so long. Revenge had never filled the void. It had only deepened it. "I don't know how to stop," Kale had said in that moment of raw vulnerability, his voice betraying the weight of his guilt. Elian's words had cracked the facade, exposing the confusion that lay just beneath the surface of his hardened exterior. The walls of his fortress, both literal and metaphorical, had been built so carefully, brick by brick, to protect him from the truth. But now, with the sting of Elian's words still sharp in his mind, Cale could no longer ignore it. That evening, Cale stood before the large window of his chamber, looking out over the sprawling kingdom. The dim light of the setting sun cast long shadows across the land, and the wind tugged at the edges of his cloak. The sight should have brought him comfort. It had always been his empire, his to control, his to shape. But tonight, it felt hollow, distant. His thoughts drifted back to Elian, to the quiet rebellion in his eyes, to the moments where Elian had refused to give in, even in the face of the harshest treatment. There was strength in the Omega, a resilience Cale had underestimated. But more than that, there was something softer, something fragile in Elian's heart that Cale could not ignore. Why does it affect me so much? Cale wondered, running a hand through his dark hair, his mind swirling with frustration. He had wanted to break Elian to punish him for the sins of his father, to make him feel the same betrayal he had felt all those years ago. But now, after everything, Cale was unsure. He had forced Elian into submission, treated him as little more than a tool for his revenge, and yet the Omega remained strong. But what pained Cale most was the realization that, through it all, Elian's suffering was not the key to his peace. It was not the salve for his own wounds. He had used Elian's grief as a mirror for his own, and now for the first time, Cale understood how destructive that had been. That night, Cale sat in his chamber, his hands clenched tightly at his sides, the weight of guilt pressing down on him. His mind replayed Elian's words over and over again, like a haunting refrain. "You've lost much, yes, but you don't understand what it's like to lose everything and have no way to get it back." Cale closed his eyes, the words cutting through him like a blade. What if he was right? What if the pain he had been carrying, his anger, his thirst for vengeance, had become a way of avoiding the truth? What if the path he had chosen was not the path to healing, but to deeper despair? The next day, Cale found himself standing outside Elian's quarters, staring at the closed door. His breath was shallow, and his heart pounded in his chest. The Omega had been silent since their last conversation, his eyes distant whenever their paths crossed. Elian had withdrawn even further, his quiet defiance still burning beneath the surface, though now tinged with sadness. Cale had avoided him for days, unsure of what to say, unsure of how to fix the damage he had done. He was a man who had always known how to command armies, how to control kingdoms, how to win. But when it came to the broken, delicate soul that was Elian, Cale was lost. He took a deep breath and raised his hand to knock, but paused. What would he say? Could anything he said undo the hurt he had caused? Could he undo the pain he had inflicted, the loss of trust that had already taken root between them? Before he could second-guess himself, the door opened, revealing Elian standing in the doorway. His eyes, dark and unreadable, flickered for a moment before settling into an expression of guarded indifference. Cale felt a pang of guilt at the sight, but he didn't look away. "Elian," Cale said, his voice low, hesitant. "Can we speak?" For a long moment, Elian didn't answer. His gaze flicked over Cale, calculating, weighing, before he stepped aside and allowed Cale to enter. Inside, the room was dimly lit, and the air felt heavy with unspoken tension. Cale could feel the weight of Elian's presence, the quiet intensity that filled the space between them. "I've been thinking," Cale began, his voice unsteady, "about what you said to me, about the way I've treated you." Elian's gaze remained steady, but there was something in his eyes now, something softer than the anger that had once clouded them. Cale couldn't tell what it was, but he knew it wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, anyway. I don't know how to make it right," Cale continued, his words hesitant. "I thought revenge would give me peace. I thought it would give me closure. But it hasn't. It's only made everything worse." Elian said nothing at first, but Cale could see the flicker of something in his eyes. Maybe hope, maybe disbelief. I've been consumed by it, Elian, Cale admitted, his voice breaking ever so slightly. And I can't undo what I've done to you or to myself. But I need you to know that I never wanted this. I never wanted you to suffer. For the first time since he had been brought to Cale's kingdom, Elian's expression softened. Not completely, but just enough that Cale could see a crack in the wall he had built around himself. There was something like understanding there. You can't take away what's been done, Cale, Elian said quietly, his voice steady but filled with a sadness that Cale had never truly noticed until now. But maybe, for the first time, you're seeing it. Maybe that's the beginning. Cale nodded slowly, feeling the weight of those words settle over him. He didn't know where this would go, didn't know what kind of man he would become now that he saw the full cost of his vengeance. But for the first time, Cale didn't feel like a monster. He didn't feel like the man he had been a moment ago, angry and lost. There was still a long way to go, but Cale knew that if he wanted peace, if he wanted to truly heal, he had to start somewhere. And for the first time, Elian's words gave him a new direction. The journey to redemption would be long, and Cale didn't expect Elian to forgive him overnight, but the path was clear now. It would be a difficult road, one filled with pain and guilt, but Cale had a glimmer of hope, however small, that maybe, just maybe, he could stop the cycle of destruction he had started. And that was a start. Chapter 19. The Revelation. The air in the palace had grown heavy in the days following Cale's visit to Elian's quarters. Though their conversation had offered a glimpse of something fragile, an understanding, a potential turning point, the weight of their circumstances had not lifted. Elian felt it, the quiet strain between them, but it was his body, not his heart, that betrayed him first. It began with an overwhelming fatigue, a slow, creeping weariness that settled into his bones, no matter how much he slept. His appetite waned, and even the smallest tasks felt impossible. Elian had grown used to pain, to the heavy burden of his captivity. But this was different. This was something inside him, something he couldn't ignore. And then, one evening, as the evening light dimmed, and the weight of the day began to settle in, Elian collapsed. His knees gave out beneath him, his vision blurring as his body crumpled to the cold floor of his quarters. A sharp, unfamiliar pain shot through his lower abdomen, and his breath came in ragged gasps. Panic surged through him as he struggled to rise, but the strength in his body had been drained, leaving him trembling, his mind spinning in confusion. He had been through so much, endured so much. But this was something entirely new. Within moments, the door burst open. Cale's voice rang out, demanding, urgent. "Elian," he called. His footsteps echoed loudly on the marble floor as he rushed to Elian's side, kneeling beside him. "What happened? What's wrong?" Elian, too weak to respond, only managed a shallow breath. The world seemed to tilt around him as he felt Cale's arms lifting him, guiding him toward the bed. His body felt foreign to him, as though it no longer obeyed his commands. Cale's voice was tight with anxiety now, his hands moving quickly, expertly, to help Elian lie down. "I'll call the doctor," Cale muttered, standing abruptly and heading for the door. Elian barely registered the word. His vision was still a blur, his body still consumed by waves of exhaustion. His heart thudded heavily in his chest, panic rising with each breath. What was happening to him? It felt like hours before the doctor arrived, though in reality, it was only moments. The aged man, the royal physician, had been summoned by Cale's command, and his face was grim as he entered the room. Cale stood at the foot of the bed, his arms crossed, a tense silence hanging in the air between them. The doctor approached Elian cautiously, his hands gentle as he checked Elian's pulse, his temperature, and the other signs of his condition. His brow furrowed as he worked, murmuring to himself. Cale stood silent, impatient, his eyes flicking nervously between the doctor and Elian's pale face. He had seen Elian sick before, He had seen him weak from the horrors of captivity, but this was different. Something was wrong, something more than just the physical toll of the years. After what felt like an eternity, the doctor finally stood up straight, turning to Kale with a solemn expression. "Your Highness," the doctor began, his voice low, almost reluctant. "The prince is pregnant." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Kale's breath caught in his throat, his mind struggling to comprehend the gravity of what he had just heard. "Pregnant?" Kale echoed, his voice betraying his shock. His gaze fell to Elian, who lay still on the bed, his face pale, his eyes closed in exhaustion. The doctor nodded gravely. "Yes, it appears to be early, but the signs are clear. The prince is pregnant." Kale's mind raced. He had not expected this. Elian, an Omega, yes, but he had never imagined this kind of fate, this kind of consequence. He had treated Elian as little more than a prisoner, a symbol of vengeance, but now there was something else, something beyond all his calculations. His gaze flicked back to Elian, who was still weak, barely conscious, his body shuddering with fatigue. A wave of guilt washed over Kale, his thoughts conflicting. His mind was consumed with the concept of revenge, yet here was Elian, his captive, his enemy, bearing a child. The room fell into an eerie silence, the doctor standing by, waiting for Kale to process the revelation. Finally, Kale took a deep breath, his hand running through his hair as he tried to steady himself. "Is it dangerous for him?" Kale asked, his voice softer now, though still filled with concern. The doctor hesitated, his expression solemn. "It is not without risk. The stress, the shock. His body is under a great deal of strain, but with rest and proper care, the child can be carried to term." Kale nodded absently, his thoughts far away. The situation was beyond anything he had ever anticipated. He had never considered the possibility that Elian could carry a child, let alone one that might have been conceived under the circumstances of their tortured, complicated relationship. Elian shifted weakly on the bed, his eyes opening just slightly, locking with Kale's. His gaze was full of apprehension, fear, and confusion. It was a look Kale had seen before, but this time it was different. There was something deeper, something darker, that Elian wasn't saying. You're not happy about this, are you?" Kale's voice was quiet, almost unsure. He didn't know why the question felt so important, why it mattered so much now. But it did. Elian's lips parted slightly, as if to speak, but no words came out at first. He winced, and his breath hitched in a quiet sob, his chest heaving with the effort to gather his thoughts. "I didn't ask for this," Elian said, his voice weak, trembling with emotion. "I didn't ask for any of this." His gaze dropped to the blanket covering his body, his hands clutching it as though trying to steady himself. "I never wanted this, but I know what it means. I know what this child means for me, for my future." Kale's throat tightened, a pang of something like guilt twisting inside him. He had never considered the full consequences of their situation, never thought beyond the immediate, the pain, the vengeance. But now, with the revelation of this child, this living, breathing connection between them, everything had changed. Elian continued, his voice barely above a whisper, his words laced with fear. "Serafina, your mother died because she was pregnant with you. My father betrayed her, and she died in exile, alone. And now, I'm here carrying the same burden, the same curse." He looked up at Kale, his eyes filled with sorrow and resignation. "Do you think this child will survive? Or will I end up like her, alone, forgotten?" Kale's heart clenched. Elian's words struck him harder than anything he had ever endured. The weight of history, the weight of his mother's death, of Elian's suffering, was heavier than the burden of revenge that Kale had carried for so long. Kale's voice cracked, unsure of what to say. He had no answers for Elian. The uncertainty, the fear, the pain, all of it was reflected in the Omega's words. And for the first time in his life, Kale didn't know what to do. The room fell into a deep silence, only broken by the soft sounds of Elian's labored breathing. Kale stood motionless, his mind racing, his emotions churning. The truth had finally caught up with him, the truth that no amount of vengeance or power could undo the damage that had been done. But now, there was something more pressing, something that Kale could no longer ignore. Elian's life, and the life of the child growing inside him. For the first time in years, Kale found himself questioning everything, his actions, his motives, his past. And now, the future seemed just as uncertain. But there was one thing Kale knew for sure. He could not let Elian suffer the way his mother had. No matter the consequences, he could not allow this child to become another casualty of his path. And with that realization, something shifted inside Kale. The vengeance that had consumed him for so long no longer felt like his only path forward. It was no longer enough. Now, he had something else to protect. Chapter 20. The Moment of Truth. The days that followed Elian's revelation weighed heavily on Kale. His mind, usually sharp and calculating, now felt clouded, as though he was seeing the world through a veil of guilt and regret. The child growing inside Elian, his child, was a reminder of everything Kale had done wrong. It was the product of his cruelty, his obsession with vengeance, and the pain he had caused an innocent person. The palace, once a fortress of power and control, now felt like a prison to Kale. His every thought was consumed by Elian's suffering, and the realization that he had crossed a line he could never undo. He had come to this kingdom to take revenge, to right the wrongs his father had suffered, but somewhere along the way, he had forgotten what true justice was. He had watched Elian, gentle, kind, and far more resilient than he had ever given him credit for, endure so much. And for what? To satisfy Kale's need for revenge? To make Elian pay for the sins of his father? The truth was painfully clear now. Elian was not the enemy. Kale was the enemy. It wasn't just his past actions that haunted him now. It was the depth of his cruelty, how he had twisted Elian's life into a living nightmare. He had hoped to break the Omega, to force him into submission, but instead, he had created a bond, a twisted, painful bond between them. And now, with the weight of Elian's pregnancy, Kale could no longer deny the truth of what he had done. He stood in his chambers, staring out at the kingdom below. The wind whipped through the open window, and the sky was darkening with the approach of night. His reflection in the glass was all he could see, a man broken by his own hands, lost in a labyrinth of pain and vengeance. He had been blind to Elian's humanity, blind to the fact that Elian, despite everything, had continued to hold on to some semblance of hope. The Omega's defiance, his quiet strength, had pierced through Kale's anger, showing him that there was something more to life than revenge. And now, as Elian lay in his chambers, sick, tired, and carrying his child, Kale understood that he had no right to continue down this path of destruction. That night, Kale made a decision. He could not undo the past. He knew that. The damage had been done. But there was still time, still a chance to stop the cycle of cruelty. He had to change. He had to do whatever it took to protect Elian, to ensure that the child would have a chance at life, free from the shadow of Kale's mistakes. He left his chambers, the weight of his resolve settling in his chest. He walked the palace corridors with purpose, the faint glow of torches casting long shadows on the walls. His mind was clear now, sharper than it had been in months. He didn't know how he would make things right, or if Elian could ever forgive him, but he knew one thing. He could no longer be the man he had been. When Kale entered Elian's room, he found the Omega lying in bed, his face pale and drawn. The doctor had come earlier to check on him, but the illness still clung to Alien like a shroud. He looked frail, vulnerable, and for the first time, Kale saw him not as a symbol of his revenge, but as a person he had wronged deeply. Alien's eyes flickered open as Kale approached, but he didn't move, didn't speak. There was a sadness in his gaze that Kale couldn't bear to look at, yet he couldn't look away either. He had caused this. He had caused this pain, this isolation. Kale took a deep breath and sat at the edge of Alien's bed, his gaze softening. For the first time in a long while, there was no anger in his chest, only regret. His voice, when he spoke, was barely above a whisper. "Alien," Kale said, his words catching in his throat. "I've made mistakes, terrible ones." Alien's eyes flickered with something like weariness, but he said nothing. He seemed too tired to argue, too worn down by everything that had happened to protest. His silence was a mirror of the walls Kale had built between them, walls that he had constructed through years of cruelty, pride, and revenge. "I never wanted to hurt you," Kale continued, his voice low, almost broken. I thought if I made you suffer, I would somehow feel better, but I was wrong." Alien shifted slightly, his gaze unwavering. Kale could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the way his body trembled with the effort of holding on. Kale reached out, his hand hovering over Alien's, unsure if he should touch him, but unable to keep the distance any longer. "I don't know how to make this right," Kale admitted, his voice raw with emotion. "But I will try. I will do whatever it takes to make sure you're safe. To make sure the child is safe. You don't deserve this life. None of this was your fault." For a moment, there was no response. The room was thick with the unspoken, the weight of everything that had transpired. Alien's eyes closed for a moment, and Kale thought he might have fallen asleep. But then, Alien's voice, soft, hesitant, broke the silence. "Why? Why are you doing this?" Alien asked, his voice barely a whisper. "You've hurt me so much. You've taken everything. Why are you changing now?" Kale swallowed hard, the question echoing in his mind. Why was he changing? What had finally made him see the truth? Was it the child? Was it the moment Alien had spoken to him honestly, had called him out for his cruelty? Or was it something else, a deeper understanding of the human cost of vengeance? "I don't know why," Kale admitted. "I just know that I can't keep doing this. I can't keep living in the past, letting it consume me. I'm sorry, Alien. I'm sorry for everything." The words felt like they could never be enough. They could never undo the suffering Kale had caused. But they were all he had to offer now. His apology, his promise to change, and his vow to protect the future they now shared, however uncertain it might be. Alien's eyes opened again, and Kale saw a flicker of something there, a fragile hope, something that had been buried under layers of pain and distrust. But it was there, a small glimmer of possibility. "I don't know if I can forgive you," Alien whispered, his voice trembling. "But I want to believe you. I want to believe that you can change." Kale nodded, the weight of Alien's words sinking into him. He didn't deserve forgiveness. He knew that. But for the first time, Kale believed that maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for redemption. He reached out and gently took Alien's hand in his, holding it with a tenderness he had never shown before. "I'll prove it to you," Kale vowed, his voice filled with quiet determination. "I'll prove it every day, for you and for the child." And in that moment, something inside Kale shifted, a change, fragile and uncertain, but real. He had spent so long chasing revenge, trying to fill a hole that could never be filled. Now, he had something new to fight for, a future, a family, and the chance to be a man worthy of Alien's trust. It wouldn't be easy. It would take time. But Kale was willing to try, because for the first time in his life, he had something worth fighting for. And in the quiet darkness of that room, with Elian's hand in his, Kale made a promise to himself. A promise he would keep no matter what. He would change. Chapter 21. Taking Responsibility. The days after Kale's promise to change were fraught with tension, but there was also something different in the air, something heavier. The weight of Kale's newfound resolve pressed on him, pushing him to face the responsibilities he had long avoided. No longer driven by revenge, he found himself caught between the lingering shadows of his past and the urgent need to protect Elian, to atone for the wrongs he had inflicted. Kale had always been a man of action, but this was different. He was no longer commanding armies or forging plans for conquest. Instead, he found himself tending to a single life, a life that was fragile, uncertain, and yet tied to his own in ways that were both painful and profound. Elian's condition was more delicate than Kale had anticipated. The Omega's pregnancy, though still in its early stages, had already taken a toll on him. Elian had always been thin, but now he seemed to have lost even more weight, his body weak, his skin pale. The fatigue weighed heavily on him, and the feverish spells that occasionally gripped him had become a cause for concern. It wasn't just his physical health that worried Kale. It was the silent, bitter resentment in Elian's eyes whenever they crossed paths. Kale had tried at first to ignore the distance between them, to push past it, believing that his actions would speak louder than his words. But the truth was undeniable. Elian wasn't ready to forgive him, and Kale wasn't sure he ever would be. The damage was deep, and the Omega's walls were as solid as ever. But Kale could no longer afford to retreat into his old habits of arrogance and pride. He had made his decision. He had to prove that he was capable of something beyond destruction, something that would earn Elian's trust, not through force, but through actions that spoke of care, of responsibility. Kale began to spend more time in Elian's quarters, something that had once seemed unimaginable. He would personally check on Elian in the mornings, making sure that the Omega was comfortable, that the room was warm enough, that he had everything he needed. Elian's discomfort and illness weren't easy to watch, but Kale never left his side for long. His guilt over his past actions was raw, but it was this constant presence that Kale hoped would show Elian that he wasn't the same man who had dragged him into this nightmare. He ensured that the best physicians in the kingdom attended to Elian's health, and if there was any indication that Elian was too weak or distressed, Kale was there, insisting on care, on rest, even though Elian never asked for it. Sometimes he would sit silently by Elian's bed, watching the Omega sleep, his chest rising and falling steadily, his face soft but still etched with the remnants of pain. There were moments when Elian's eyes would meet his, and Kale would see something in them, something almost like curiosity, mixed with a deep, cautious wariness. But then the wall would fall again, and Elian would close off, retreating into himself, unwilling to give Kale any more than he had to. Despite everything, Kale didn't retreat. He remained. He helped Elian sit up, brought him food that was prepared with care, and made sure that the Omega's comfort came before anything else. Kale would even read to him from his personal collection of books, his voice low and steady, though it was clear that Elian didn't want his presence. But Kale persisted, not because he thought it would erase his sins, but because it was the right thing to do. He would show Elian that he wasn't just the man who had destroyed, but also the man who could build, who could protect, even if it meant taking on a responsibility he had never asked for. But the bitterness remained in Elian, a bitterness that was as sharp as a blade. He would often turn his face away from Kale's touch, refusing the kindness he offered, as though he feared it was just another form of manipulation. Kale had hurt him too deeply for his gestures to be easily accepted. Elian had seen too much suffering at Kale's hands to believe in his redemption so quickly. One evening, as Kale entered the room to check on Elian, he found the Omega sitting at the window, looking out over the kingdom. The light of the setting sun bathed the room in golden hues, but Elian's posture was slumped, his face expressionless. Kale hesitated, unsure of how to approach. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words seemed inadequate. It had always been easier for Kale to command, to demand obedience. But this was different. This was about healing, about earning trust, and Kale wasn't sure how to begin. "Alien," Kale said softly, standing a few feet away, his voice carrying the weight of the past. "How are you feeling today?" Alien didn't respond immediately. He stared out the window, his back to Kale, and for a moment, Kale thought he wouldn't answer at all. But then Alien spoke, his voice low and laced with bitterness. "Why are you doing this?" Alien's words were sharp, cutting through the silence like a knife. "Why are you suddenly concerned about me? About my health? What do you want from me, Kale? You've already taken everything from me. What else is there for you to steal?" Kale's chest tightened at the venom in Alien's voice. He had expected anger, but this was something more. This was a man who had been broken so many times that trust had become impossible. Alien's pain was no longer just about his own suffering. It was about the years of betrayal, of manipulation, of being used as a pawn in Kale's revenge. Kale took a step closer, but didn't approach too quickly, respecting the distance that Alien so fiercely maintained. He could feel the tension in the room, the walls Alien had built so high, and yet Kale couldn't allow himself to turn away. "Not this time." "I'm not doing this for myself," Kale said, his voice thick with the weight of sincerity. "I'm doing this because I owe you. I owe you more than I can ever repay, but I'll try. I know I've hurt you. I know what I've done, but I want to take responsibility for it, Alien. I want to make sure you're safe, that you're taken care of. I won't abandon you." Alien's shoulders stiffened at Kale's words, and for a moment there was silence between them. His eyes didn't shift from the window, but Kale saw a flicker of something there, a glimpse of the man he had once been, the man who had loved, who had cared. Kale's heart ached with the realization that he had stripped that away, that he had shattered Alien's trust in a way that might never be fixed. "I don't want your pity," Alien said harshly, his voice breaking the quiet air. "I don't need your help now. You've already taken everything from me. What's left?" Kale felt the weight of Alien's words like a crushing blow, but he refused to look away, refused to let Alien's anger drive him away. "You're wrong," Kale said softly. "I haven't taken everything. I haven't taken your future. I won't take this child from you. I won't take your hope. I can't undo the past, but I can show you day by day that I will be here for you, not as your enemy, but as someone who has learned, someone who is trying." Alien's gaze flickered toward Kale, but there was no warmth there, only guardedness. His expression was unreadable, the walls high and firm. But Kale saw something, a crack, no matter how small, in the armor Alien had built around his heart. "I don't believe you," Alien whispered, his voice cracking as he finally turned to face Kale. "But I don't want to fight anymore. I just want to be left alone." Kale didn't know what to say. He had no answer, no promise that could fix everything. All he could do was nod quietly, acknowledging Alien's pain. And for the first time, Kale left the room without a word of defiance or anger. He didn't push, didn't demand. He simply left, knowing that this was just one step on a long, uncertain journey. But it was a start. The road ahead would be difficult, and Alien's bitterness would not disappear overnight. But Kale knew one thing for sure. He would remain. He would take responsibility, no matter how much Alien resented him, because he owed it to the Omega, and to the child growing inside him. Kale wasn't sure if Alien would ever forgive him, but he would keep trying. Every day. Chapter 22. The Changing Heart. The palace, once a fortress of ruthless power, had become a place of stillness. Kale walked its halls, but it no longer felt like home. His footsteps were quieter now, more deliberate, as if he were constantly weighing the consequences of every action he took. The urgency of war and vengeance had faded, replaced by a slower, more deliberate pace that reflected the transformation happening within him. It was hard to pinpoint exactly when the change began. Perhaps it was the first time he had held Elian's hand, knowing that it was the smallest of gestures, yet a symbol of something far greater, an acknowledgement of their shared pain, of the bond between them that had formed despite all the hatred and cruelty. Or perhaps it had been that quiet night when he had promised to protect Elian and the child, to be something better than the man who had destroyed so much. Whatever the moment, Cale knew one thing for certain. He was no longer the man he had been when he first set foot in Elian's kingdom. The thirst for revenge, which had once consumed him, was starting to dissipate, and in its place was a deep, steady need to make things right, not just for himself, but for Elian. One afternoon, Cale found himself standing on the balcony of the palace, staring out over the vast, lush lands that stretched out before him. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows over the kingdom, its light soft and golden. Cale could hear the sounds of the court beneath him, but it all felt distant now. The war, the battles, the promises of destruction, they all felt like echoes of a life that no longer suited him. He had won. He had avenged his mother's death by killing King Alaric. His father, Lord Thalric, had demanded more. He had urged Cale to press on, to take control of the kingdom and crush Elian's lineage entirely. But for the first time in his life, Cale found himself unable to follow the path that had once been so clear to him. The truth was, he didn't need more revenge. What had killing King Alaric really brought him? Satisfaction? Power? No. It had only brought more sorrow. Elian's suffering, the hollow look in his eyes, the way he still recoiled from Cale's touch, none of it had been worth it. What had he gained from all of this? Cale's heart, once cold and full of vengeance, was slowly melting. It had taken time, and it had taken Elian's silent strength, his quiet pain, for Cale to truly see the depth of his own cruelty. He had spent so long chasing something that could never heal him, but now he saw the truth. Elian's happiness was more important than his quest for revenge. If he wanted to honor the memory of his mother, then he had to break the cycle of pain, not perpetuate it. Lord Thalric's letter arrived that evening as Cale had anticipated. It was cold, calculating, urging his son to continue the war, to extend his control over Elian's kingdom and solidify his power. The words were as harsh as ever, filled with demands for more conquests, more victories. Cale didn't even finish reading the letter before he crumpled it in his hand and tossed it into the fire. The flames consumed it eagerly, and the paper twisted and blackened, disappearing into nothing. He knew what his father wanted. He knew that Lord Thalric would never understand. The old man had been consumed by his own thirst for vengeance, his own obsession with power. He believed in strength above all else. But Cale couldn't follow that path anymore. He couldn't sacrifice Elian and the child, his own flesh and blood, for the sake of a future built on more bloodshed. Cale sought out Elian that night, finding him sitting by the window, his gaze distant and unfocused, as if he were lost in his thought. The Omega's body had grown weaker with each passing day, the toll of the pregnancy and his emotional scars evident in the dark circles beneath his eyes. Cale hesitated for a moment, unsure how to approach him. The tension between them had lessened, but it was still there, lingering, thick with unspoken words. He had been patient, trying to show Elian that he could be trusted, that he wasn't the same man who had stolen his life. But Cale knew that actions spoke louder than words, and he still had so much to prove. "Elian," Cale said quietly, stepping into the room. "There's something I need to tell you." Elian turned slowly, his eyes locking with Cale's. His expression was guarded, but there was a faint trace of curiosity beneath the caution. "What is it?" Elian's voice was still wary, though it lacked the sharpness it once held. There was a flicker of exhaustion in it now, a tiredness that Cale couldn't ignore. "I've decided," Cale said, his voice steady but filled with an emotion that surprised even him. I won't continue the war. I won't go after your kingdom. I won't take any more lives, and I won't cause you any more pain." Elian's eyes widened, a flash of disbelief crossing his face. He opened his mouth to say something, but Kale continued before he could speak. "I've already avenged my mother's death. My revenge is over." Kale's voice softened, the weight of his words settling on him. "I've been blind. I've spent so long fighting for a future built on vengeance, but that's not the future I want anymore. I've hurt you, Elian, and I can never undo that, but I can stop now. I will stop." Elian stared at him, his expression unreadable. Kale could see the conflict in his eyes, the struggle between disbelief and hope, the flicker of something almost like relief mixed with uncertainty. "I don't believe you," Elian whispered, his voice trembling just slightly. "Not yet?" Kale nodded, acknowledging the truth in Elian's words. He had a long way to go, and Elian's trust would not be easily won back. But Kale was willing to earn it, day by day, step by step. "I understand," Kale said quietly. "I won't ask for your forgiveness. I know that I don't deserve it, but I'm here, Elian, I'm staying, and I will do whatever it takes to make this right." Elian didn't speak for a long time, his eyes fixed on Kale, as if trying to read him, to discern whether this was another lie. The silence between them felt heavy, but Kale didn't move, didn't rush Elian. He was willing to wait, willing to prove himself in every way possible. Finally, Elian lowered his gaze, his shoulders slumping slightly as if the weight of everything that had happened had momentarily lifted. "Why?" Elian's voice was barely audible. "Why now?" Kale took a step closer, his gaze softening, as he tried to find the words to explain the shift in his heart. "Because I see now that what I wanted, what I thought I wanted, wasn't worth it," Kale said, his voice filled with the truth of his own transformation. "I thought revenge would make me whole, but it hasn't. I've only made things worse. I don't want to lose you, Elian. Not like this." For the first time, Elian met his eyes without flinching, without pulling away. There was still a wall between them, but Kale could see the faintest crack in it, a crack that had never been there before. And though Kale knew it would take time, though he understood that Elian's healing couldn't be rushed, he allowed himself to believe that this moment, this choice, was the first step toward a future where vengeance no longer had a hold on him. For the first time in years, Kale allowed himself to hope. The future was uncertain, but in that moment, surrounded by the warmth of the palace, Kale knew that the heart he had once closed off, cold and consumed by revenge, was finally beginning to thaw. And for the first time, he truly believed that change was possible. Chapter 23: A Promise for the Future. The weight of the past hung heavily in the air as Kale stood before Elian, his heart racing with a mixture of trepidation and determination. The palace room was quiet, the only sound the soft rustling of the curtains as a gentle breeze passed through the open window. Kale had never felt so exposed, so vulnerable. This moment, this conversation, was unlike any he had ever had. No power, no weapons, no plans of conquest. Just him, standing in front of the Omega he had wronged so deeply, with nothing but his heart laid bare. For days, Kale had reflected on the cruelty he had inflicted on Elian, the torment he had caused, and the impossible distance between them. He had sought power, vengeance, control, but now all he wanted was to heal, to fix what he had broken. But he knew, deep down, that healing wasn't something that could be rushed, nor was it something he could demand. It was something that had to be earned, patiently, day by day. And so, Kale took a deep breath, steeling himself before he spoke. "Elian," he began, his voice low and steady but filled with sincerity. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness and I don't expect it, but I need to say this." He paused, swallowing hard. "I am sorry, truly sorry for everything I've done. I've hurt you in ways that can never be undone, and I can never take back the pain I've caused. but I want you to know that I regret it. I regret everything." Kael's gaze was steady, his eyes filled with a raw honesty that had been buried for so long beneath layers of anger and pride. He had always been a man of action, but here, with Elian, words were all he had to offer. "I was blinded by my desire for vengeance, by the hatred my father instilled in me," Kael continued, his hands clenched by his side. "But in doing so, I lost sight of what really mattered. I lost sight of you, of your pain, your humanity. I can't change the past, but I will spend the rest of my life trying to make it right. For you, and for our child." Elian remained silent for a long moment, his eyes downcast, his expression unreadable. Kael could feel the tension in the air, could almost taste the weight of the unspoken words. His heart pounded, and a part of him feared that Elian would never forgive him, that the walls between them would remain forever unbroken. Finally, Elian spoke, his voice soft, tired, yet carrying an underlying strength. "I don't want your apology, Kael," Elian said quietly, his eyes lifting to meet Kael's, the exhaustion in his gaze palpable. "I don't want your regret or your promises. You've already taken enough from me." His voice faltered slightly, but he steadied himself before continuing. "I don't need vengeance. I don't need revenge. What I need is peace, a simple life. A life free from the pain you've caused." Kael's heart clenched at Elian's word. It was so simple, so profoundly different from everything he had once believed in. Elian wasn't asking for Kael to fight for him or prove himself through more bloodshed. He wasn't asking for grand gestures or titles. All he wanted was peace, a life untouched by the cruelty that had been forced upon him. Kael's breath caught in his throat, and for a moment he found himself lost for words. He had spent so long consumed by a need for vengeance, for retribution, that he had never considered the possibility of a future where peace could exist, where love and quiet joy could replace the fire of war and bloodshed. "I can't undo what I've done," Kael said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "But if peace is what you want, then that's what I will give you. I can't promise that I'll be perfect, that I won't make mistakes again, but I swear to you I'll do everything in my power to give you the life you deserve, to give our child a future where they don't have to live in the shadow of what I've done." Elian's eyes softened, and for the first time in a long while, Kael saw something like hope flicker there, something fragile but real. "You have already given me something I thought I'd never have," Elian said, his voice quiet, yet carrying a weight that Kael could feel deep in his chest. "You've given me the chance to live without fear, without looking over my shoulder. The chance to raise this child in a world where I don't have to fight anymore." Kael stepped closer, kneeling before Elian, his heart aching with the weight of everything he had caused. Elian was right. He had never truly understood what Elian needed, what Elian had longed for in his quiet, stoic way. Peace, not war. Love, not cruelty. "I'll protect you, Elian," Kael said, his voice firm yet tender. "I'll protect our child, and I'll do everything I can to give you that peace, no matter what it takes." Elian's gaze softened, though there was still a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Kael understood. He knew that trust couldn't be rebuilt overnight, and that the scars he had left on Elian's heart might never fully heal. But Kael was willing to try. He was willing to fight for the peace that Elian had asked for, even if it meant letting go of everything he had once believed in. Elian remained silent for a moment. Then, with a deep sigh, he nodded slightly, as if allowing himself to believe in the possibility of a different future. "I don't need your promises," Elian said softly. "I need to see it. I need to see you change." Kael's heart swelled with emotion, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of clarity. He had spent his life trying to force others to bend to his will, but now he understood that the only way to move forward was to be patient, to prove himself through his actions, not his word. "I will," Kael said simply, his voice thick with resolve. "I'll show you, every day." In the days that followed, Kale kept his word. He remained by Elian's side, tending to his needs with quiet care and respect. He made sure that Elian had everything he needed: food, rest, and medical care. More importantly, he gave him space to heal, to grow, and to breathe, without the constant shadow of Kale's past looming over him. As Elian's pregnancy progressed, Kale could see the subtle changes in him. There was still a distance, a wariness, but it was lessening, ever so slightly. Kale's constant presence, his quiet dedication, seemed to be wearing down the walls that Elian had built around himself. Elian's trust would take time. Kale knew that. But in the quiet moments they shared, when Elian allowed him to help with small tasks, when their eyes met with a hint of understanding, even when Elian rested his head on Kale's shoulder in a rare moment of vulnerability, Kale knew he was on the right path. The days grew longer as Elian's due date approached, and Kale's heart beat with a new kind of anticipation. A future that had once seemed so distant, so impossible, was now within reach. He had hurt Elian, yes, and there were scars that would never fade, but in this moment, Kale knew that he had a chance to change. He had a chance to build something different, to offer Elian the peace and love he had long deserved. And for the first time in his life, Kale felt a sense of hope. He had no illusions. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, that there would be moments of doubt, of pain. But with Elian by his side, and with the promise of a future that was no longer defined by vengeance, Kale knew he could face anything. He would protect Elian, protect their child, and he would do everything in his power to give them the peaceful life they both longed for. This was his promise for the future. Chapter 24. A New Beginning. The dawn broke over the kingdom with a gentle light, casting a soft glow across the land. The once bustling and oppressive palace felt quieter, more serene, as if the very walls had absorbed the changes within. The sounds of the court had softened, replaced by the soft rhythm of nature and the steady beat of a kingdom at rest. It was a stark contrast to the days when Kale's steps echoed like the march of war, forceful, relentless, unyielding. Now, every step Kale took was deliberate, purposeful. The weight of his past still lingered in his heart. But there was something new, something lighter, holding him upright. A quiet resolve to build something better, to be someone better, not just for himself, but for Elian and their child. Kale stood before Elian in the quiet of their private chambers, his heart thudding with the gravity of the moment. The Omega was seated on a cushioned chair, his fingers resting lightly on the small bump that marked the beginning of their shared future. His body had grown more delicate with each passing day, but there was strength in him too, a strength that had carried him through unimaginable pain. And now, as Kale looked at Elian, he knew that his own strength could no longer be the strength of conquest, but the strength of protection, of nurture, of love. "Promise me," Elian said, his voice soft but unwavering, "that the future will be different, that the life we give this child will be one of peace." Kale knelt before him, the very act and expression of his devotion. There was no throne, no war room, no crown on his head. This was not a king seeking power, but a man who had lost everything only to find what truly mattered. "I swear to you, Elian," Kale said, his voice thick with sincerity, "the kingdom will be ruled with kindness. I will lead with compassion, not force. There will be no more wars, no more suffering, no more bloodshed in my name. The child we bring into this world will know nothing but love, warmth, and safety. And you will know nothing but peace." Elian's eyes softened, the ever-present tension in his shoulders easing just slightly. His hand reached out to Kale's, a gesture that still carried hesitation, but this time, there was no withdrawal. There was only a tentative trust, a fragile hope that they could rebuild what had been lost. "You've already done more for me than I ever thought possible," Elian murmured, his fingers brushing against Kale's with an almost imperceptible gentleness. I still don't know if I can ever fully forgive you, Kale. But I can see that you're trying, and that matters more than you know." Kale's chest tightened with emotion. He had never believed that a life built on cruelty could be redeemed. But in these simple words from Elian, words that didn't demand perfection, but understanding, Kale felt a spark of hope that he had never allowed himself to believe in before. "I will spend my life proving it to you," Kale promised, his voice firm yet soft. "Not just in words, but in actions. I will protect you, Elian. I will protect our child, and I will never let the past haunt us again." Elian closed his eyes for a moment, as though savoring the quiet comfort of Kale's presence. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something deeper, an acceptance, however fragile, that perhaps they could both have a future free from the chains of their past. In the weeks that followed, the changes within the kingdom became clear. Kale, with his newfound understanding of leadership, began to shift the policies of his court. He introduced reforms that emphasized the welfare of his people, focusing on trade, agriculture, and healthcare. He consulted the wisest advisors, not just those who followed power, but those who had knowledge of peace, of diplomacy, of kindness. His army, once his pride and weapon of terror, was restructured into a protective force, one that would defend the kingdom but not conquer it. The men and women under Kale's command were now tasked with rebuilding, with protecting the weak, with offering help to neighboring lands in need. Kale no longer saw them as instruments of war, but as instruments of hope. And with every decision he made, with every reform, he could feel a subtle shift in the kingdom's atmosphere. The land that had once been scarred by conflict now began to heal. The people who had long feared Kale's rule began to see glimpses of a new future, a future that was brighter, gentler, and full of promise. One evening, as the sun set in the distance, casting the sky in hues of gold and pink, Kale and Elian stood together on the balcony of their chambers. The cool evening breeze brushed past them, and Elian leaned against the railing, his eyes scanning the horizon. "Do you ever wonder if it's too late?" Elian asked quietly, his voice thoughtful. "If we already done too much damage to ever fix things?" Kale stood beside him, watching the same horizon, his hand resting gently on Elian's shoulder. "Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever truly make up for the things I've done," he said, his voice low. "But I know that as long as I have you, as long as we have each other, there's a chance for something better." Elian looked up at him then, and for the first time in a long while, his expression softened. No longer weary, no longer guarded, but a glimmer of something akin to trust. "I never thought I'd be here with you," Elian said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I never thought I'd have a future that wasn't filled with fear, but I can see it now. I can see the possibility of a life I never thought I deserved." Kale turned to face him fully, his heart swelling at the vulnerable, tender words Elian had spoken. "You do deserve it all, Elian. You deserve a life filled with peace, with joy, with love. And I will make sure that's the life we give our child. A life where the past is behind us, and the future is full of nothing but promise." Elian smiled faintly, his hand finding Kale's and squeezing it lightly. There was still pain between them, still scars that would take time to heal, but in that moment, Kale felt something change, something subtle, yet undeniable. It was the beginning of something new. The birth of their child marked the beginning of that new life, the life that Kale had promised Elian. The palace was filled with an overwhelming sense of hope as they welcomed a healthy baby, their child, into the world. Kale had been by Elian's side through every moment, every contraction, every challenge. And when their child's first cry filled the room, Kale's heart swelled with an emotion he couldn't even name. It was the start of a new chapter, one where revenge and cruelty had no place, and love and kindness were the foundations of their world. For Kale, this child was not a symbol of conquest, but a symbol of renewal, a new beginning. And for the first time in his life, Kale felt that he was finally living up to the promise he had made, to protect, to love, and to cherish the family they were building together. As he held their child in his arms, looking down at the tiny face that was a perfect blend of both him and Elian, Kale made a silent vow. He would keep his promise. For Elian, for their child, for the future. This was just the beginning. And Kale was determined to make it a life worth living. Chapter 25. The Legacy of Love. The passage of years had softened the hard edges of the past, replacing the bitterness between Kale and Elian with something far stronger, love. It had been a long and difficult journey, filled with pain, regret, and moments of doubt. But through it all, they had stood together, learning to forgive, learning to heal, and above all, learning to love. In the peaceful quiet of the palace garden, Kale stood watching the two people who had come to mean everything to him. Their son, now a playful, energetic boy with a dominant alpha spirit, darted through the grass, his laughter echoing through the air. Elian, no longer the fragile Omega Kale had once held captive by his cruelty, was kneeling in the soft earth, gently coaxing their son into a game of hide and seek. The once broken prince was now a proud father, his eyes full of warmth and pride as he watched their child play. There was an undeniable shift in the air, a sense of peace that Kale hadn't known was possible. He leaned against the stone pillar of the garden's archway, his heart swelling with emotions he could scarcely put into words. He had never imagined that this moment, the one where he stood in the shadow of the very love he had once sought to destroy, would ever come to be. Their son, with his wild curls and boundless energy, was a reminder of how far they had come. He was a symbol of new beginnings, of a future that was not defined by Kale's past actions, but by the choices they made together. And now, with Elian carrying their second child, a new chapter was unfolding, one that Kale knew would be filled with more love, more joy, and more hope than they had ever dreamed possible. Elian glanced up from the game, his smile radiant, and Kale felt his heart catch in his throat. Elian had never looked more beautiful. The glow of pregnancy suited him, and it wasn't just his growing belly that made Kale's heart ache with pride. It was the confidence, the sense of peace that had come over him. Elian, once fragile and scarred by years of torment, was now thriving. He had found his strength, and it was a strength Kale could never have imagined back when he had first laid eyes on him. As their son ran toward Elian with an excited shout, Kale's heart swelled. He knew what this moment meant, not just for them as a family, but for the kingdom they had fought so hard to rebuild. The future of the kingdom no longer lay in the hands of a king, driven by vengeance, but in the hands of a father, a partner, and a protector who was determined to make sure that love, not hate, would be the foundation of everything they built from here on. "Papa, catch me," their son called, his voice full of youthful exuberance. Kale's eyes softened, his lips curling into a smile. He straightened and stepped forward, the warmth of his son's presence pulling him into the moment. Elian stood, brushing dirt from his hands, and watched as Kale joined in the game. Their son ran toward him, his little legs carrying him faster than Kale had anticipated, and Kale swooped him up into his arms with a laugh. Elian watched them, his expression full of joy, and for a brief moment Kale thought he saw the briefest flicker of that old pain in Elian's eyes. But it was gone almost as quickly as it had come. They had built this life together, and it had made them both stronger. "You're getting faster," Kale said to their son, holding him up to see the proud smile on his face. "I'll be faster than you one day, Papa," their son declared, his eyes gleaming with the same fiery spirit that Kale had once possessed. Kale laughed, nodding with pride. "I have no doubt." Elian came over, placing a hand on Kale's shoulder, and for a moment, they stood together in the quiet of the garden, their family complete. The past, with all its bloodshed and heartache, had fallen away, replaced by this simple moment of love. "I never thought I'd get here," Elian murmured softly, his voice full of meaning. "I never thought we'd be here." Kale turned to him, his eyes filled with tenderness. I know, neither did I, but we are. As the years passed, the echoes of their past faded, replaced by the sounds of laughter, of family, of peace. The kingdom, once marked by fear and conflict, was now one of prosperity. Kale ruled not with an iron fist, but with wisdom and care, his every decision guided by the love he had for Elian and their children. The counselors who once advised him in the ways of war were now those who spoke of healing, of trade, and of the well-being of the people. The people of the kingdom, once fearful of the king who had taken so much from them, now looked to him as a symbol of hope. The stories of Kale's reign were no longer filled with tales of conquest or revenge, but of redemption, love, and the quiet strength that comes from truly understanding what it means to lead with compassion. And as Elian's second pregnancy progressed, the kingdom was filled with the kind of anticipation that Kale had never thought possible. Their family would continue to grow, their legacy would continue to be built, not on the foundations of violence or hatred, but on love, forgiveness, and the strength they had found together. One evening, after the sun had set and the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Kale and Elian stood together on the balcony, gazing out over the garden. Their son was already asleep in his room, and the sounds of the palace were quiet, peaceful. I never thought I'd be here with you, Elian, Kale said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. After everything, I didn't think I deserved this, but now, I can't imagine life without it. Elian rested his head on Kale's shoulder, his eyes tracing the stars above them. We both made mistakes. We both lost things we can never get back. But we've gained something too. Something far more precious. Kale pulled Elian closer, his hand resting gently on Elian's growing belly, where their second child lay. A family, a future. Elian smiled, the weariness of the past years still in his eyes, but now replaced by a quiet contentment. A legacy of love, he murmured. Kale nodded, the weight of the words sinking in. This was their true legacy, the love they had built together, the forgiveness they had learned to give, the family they had created from the ashes of the past. The kingdom, once torn apart by war and bitterness, was now a place where peace reigned. And Kale knew, in his heart, that this was the life he had always wanted. Not the kingdom, not the power, but this, Elian, their children, and the love that had redeemed them both. The family they had built together was Kale's true legacy. One of love, one of forgiveness, one of redemption. And it was more than enough. That's all for today on Cherry Blossom BL Story. Thank you for watching. What do you think about this chapter? Did you like it, or do you think something unexpected is coming? Comment your thoughts below, and subscribe for more stories.